The CEO's hand trembled as she lifted the glass. Across the bar, a man wiping tables noticed what no one else did. The slight tremor, the hollow eyes, the silent scream behind her perfect mask. Ethan Cole wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be a doctor. But life had other plans, and tonight those plans would collide with a woman on the edge of losing everything. If you want to see how one desperate night changed two broken lives forever, stay with me until the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down like punishment. It hammered against the windows of Sullivan's Bar and Grill with a relentless fury, as if the sky itself had something to prove. The neon sign outside flickered, a tired, dying heartbeat of red and blue that cast strange shadows across the nearly empty establishment. Thursday nights were usually slow, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the kind of night where stories begin. Ethan Cole stood behind the bar, methodically polishing a glass that was already clean. It was a habit he'd picked up in the 3 years since his life had fallen apart. The repetitive motion gave his hands something to do while his mind wandered to places he'd rather not go. The emergency room, the lawsuit, the moment he'd watched his medical career crumble like ash in his fingers. He was 38 years old, and he'd already lived two completely different lives. The first life had been promising. Dr. Ethan Cole, emergency room physician at Boston General, known for his steady hands and even steadier nerves. The kind of doctor nurses requested by name. The kind of doctor who could look death in the face and say, "Not today." That life ended on a Tuesday. The second life was this one. A cramped apartment, a bar that smelled like stale beer and broken dreams, and a 7-year-old daughter who was slowly going deaf while he scraped together every penny he could find. "You're going to wear a hole through that glass, Cole." Ethan looked up. Mickey Sullivan, the bar's owner and the closest thing Ethan had to a friend these days, was watching him from the kitchen doorway. Mickey was 63, built like a retired boxer, and had the kind of face that had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. "Just thinking," Ethan said. "Thinking's dangerous for a man in your position." Mickey walked over and leaned against the bar. "Emma?" The name hit Ethan like it always did, a soft blow to the chest that never quite stopped hurting. "Got a call from the specialist today. She needs surgery within the next 6 months, or the hearing loss becomes permanent." "How much?" $47,000, after insurance. Mickey let out a low whistle. "Jesus." "Yeah." Ethan set down the glass. "I've got about 8,000 saved. Been picking up extra shifts at the cleaning company." "The janitor gig at that tech building?" "Lane Technologies, pays decent. Mostly night work after I finish here." Ethan shrugged. "It's not glamorous, but it's money." "You're running yourself into the ground, kid." "I don't have a choice." Before Mickey could respond, the front door swung open, and a gust of cold, wet air rushed into the bar. Both men turned to look. She stood in the doorway like something out of a noir film, a woman in her early 40s, expensive coat soaked through, dark hair plastered to her face. Even dripping wet and clearly disheveled, there was something commanding about her presence, something that made you pay attention. Ethan recognized her immediately. Victoria Lane. He'd seen her face 100 times, on the covers of business magazines, on the massive portrait that hung in the lobby of Lane Technologies, on the news segments that praised her as a pioneer in AI-driven medical technology. She was the founder and CEO of one of the most innovative companies in the country, a self-made billionaire who had clawed her way up from nothing. And right now, she looked like she was about to shatter. She walked to the bar without looking at either of them, settled onto a stool at the far end, and placed both palms flat on the counter. Her hands were shaking. "Whiskey," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "Whatever you have. Leave the bottle." Ethan exchanged a glance with Mickey, who gave a slight nod and retreated to the kitchen. This was Ethan's territory now. He grabbed a bottle of Jameson and a glass, walked over, and set them in front of her. Up close, he could see the cracks in her armor, the redness around her eyes, the slight smudge of mascara on her cheek, the way her jaw was clenched so tight it had to hurt. "Rough night?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. She didn't look at him, just poured 3 fingers of whiskey and downed it in one swift motion. Then she poured another. "You could say that?" Ethan knew he should walk away, mind his own business. That was the unwritten rule of bartending. You served the drinks, You may be offered a sympathetic ear, but you never pushed. People came to bars to escape, not to be interrogated. But something about the way she was sitting there, so controlled, so contained, even as she was clearly falling apart, made him pause. "I'm not going to pry," he said, "but I've seen a lot of people sit where you're sitting. Whatever it is, the bottom of that bottle isn't where you'll find the answer." For the first time, she looked at him, really looked at him. Her eyes were a striking shade of green, sharp and intelligent, but right now they held something else, something he recognized. Despair. "You don't know what I'm looking for," she said. "Maybe not, but I know that look. It's the look of someone who just watched something they built get torn down." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Are you always this observant?" Occupational hazard. Used to be a doctor. That got her attention. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with new interest. "Used to be?" "Long story, not as interesting as it sounds." "I doubt that." She took another sip of whiskey, slower this time. "What kind of doctor?" "Emergency room. Trauma, mostly." "And now you're a bartender and a janitor." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Life doesn't always go according to plan." Something shifted in her expression. The wall she'd been holding up seemed to crack just a little. No, it doesn't." They sat in silence for a moment. The rain continued its assault on the windows. Somewhere in the back, Mickey was clanking around in the kitchen, pretending not to listen. "I found out something tonight," Victoria said quietly. She wasn't looking at Ethan anymore. She was staring at the amber liquid in her glass, watching the way the bar lights reflected off its surface. "Something that changes everything." Ethan said nothing. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best thing you could do was simply be present. Let people find their own way to the words. "I've spent 15 years building something, sacrificed everything, relationships, my health, any chance at a normal life. I told myself it was worth it because what we were creating would help people, save lives." She laughed again, that same bitter sound. "Project Helios. Do you know what that is?" "I've read about it. AI-assisted diagnostics, right? Early detection of diseases that usually go unnoticed until it's too late." "It's more than that. It's my life's work. Everything I've ever cared about distilled into one system." She drained her glass and reached for the bottle again. "And tonight, I discovered that my CFO, a man I've trusted for 8 years, has been secretly negotiating to sell it to our biggest competitor, behind my back." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He knew enough about corporate espionage to understand what that meant. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a death sentence for everything she'd built. "How did you find out?" "An email. Accidentally CC'd to someone who actually has a conscience." Victoria's grip on the glass tightened. "Damien Cross. I brought him into this company. I mentored him. I trusted him with—" She stopped, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that by the time the board meeting happens next month, he'll have enough votes to force me out. And once I'm gone, Helios gets sold to people who will bury it. Use it to inflate insurance premiums instead of save lives." "Have you confronted him?" "And say what?" "I don't have proof. The email was deleted within minutes of being sent. I only know about it because the person who received it called me immediately. Damien's been planning this for months, maybe years. He's covered his tracks." She finally looked up at Ethan, and he saw something new in her eyes. Determination. "I'm not going to let him win. I don't know how yet, but I'm not going to let him destroy what I've built." "Then don't." "It's not that simple." "It never is." Ethan leaned against the bar. "But you didn't get to where you are by giving up when things got hard. You figured it out before. You'll figure it out again." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "You're a strange bartender. You're a strange CEO." Despite everything, she smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. "Fair enough." She glanced at her watch and seemed to realize how much time had passed. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow that I need to pretend to be functional for." "You drove here?" "Took a car service. She pulled out her phone, stared at it for a moment, then let out a frustrated sigh. "App isn't working." "Of course. Cabs don't run much in this weather." Mickey called from the kitchen doorway, apparently having given up any pretense of not listening. Storm's supposed to get worse before it gets better. Victoria rubbed her temples. She was still slightly unsteady. The whiskey had done its work. I'll figure something out. I can drive you. The words were out of Ethan's mouth before he'd fully thought them through. Both Victoria and Mickey looked at him with surprise. I'm off in 20 minutes, he continued. I've got a car. It's nothing fancy, but it'll get you home. Victoria hesitated. Ethan could see the internal debate playing out on her face, the instinct to refuse help warring with practical necessity. I don't even know your name, she said. Ethan. Ethan Cole. Why would you do this? Drive a stranger home in a storm? It was a good question. Ethan wasn't entirely sure of the answer himself. Maybe it was because he recognized something in her, the same exhaustion, the same desperate determination to keep going, even when everything was falling apart. Maybe it was because she reminded him of himself 3 years ago, sitting in a lawyer's office learning that his career was over. Or maybe it was simply because she needed help, and he'd spent too many years being the kind of person who helped. Because it's raining, he said simply, and because you look like you could use a break. She stared at him for what felt like a long time. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right, Ethan Cole, take me home. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. And don't ask why. The drive took 45 minutes. Victoria lived in a penthouse apartment in one of the most exclusive buildings in the city, the kind of place that had doormen in suits and elevators that required keycards. Ethan's 15-year-old Honda Civic looked comically out of place when he pulled up to the entrance. They'd barely spoken during the drive. Victoria had spent most of the time staring out the window at the rain-streaked city lights, lost in thoughts Ethan couldn't begin to imagine. He hadn't pushed. Some silences needed to be respected. When he stopped the car, she didn't move immediately. Just sat there, hands folded in her lap, looking at the gleaming lobby of her building like it was a prison she was being returned to. Thank you, she said finally, for the ride and for not asking. You said not to. Most people would have asked anyway. I'm not most people. She turned to look at him, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Two people who had been knocked down by life, still fighting to get back up. No, she said softly. I don't think you are. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. If you ever need anything, a job reference, a favor, whatever, call this number. Ethan took the card. It was heavy stock, embossed with the Lane Technologies logo. Her personal line was handwritten on the back. I appreciate it, but I insist. There was a flash of the CEO in her voice now, the woman who was used to being obeyed. Consider it payment for services rendered. Before he could respond, she was out of the car and walking toward the building entrance. She didn't look back. Ethan sat there for a moment, watching her disappear into the lobby. Then he looked down at the card in his hand. He should throw it away. Whatever was happening in Victoria Lane's life, it was corporate drama on a scale he couldn't begin to comprehend. He had his own problems. Emma's surgery, the bills piling up, the exhaustion that had become his constant companion. But something stopped him. Instead of tossing the card, he slipped it into his wallet. 2 weeks later, Ethan got the call. He was at Lane Technologies, pushing a mop across the executive floor at 2 a.m. when his phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer. Mr. Cole? The voice was crisp, professional. A woman, but not Victoria. Speaking. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm Victoria Lane's executive assistant. Ms. Lane would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Are you available at 9 a.m.? Ethan stopped mopping. I'm sorry, meet with me about what? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details over the phone, but Ms. Lane specifically requested you by name. She said you'd understand. He didn't understand. Not even a little, but curiosity got the better of him. 9 a.m. I'll be there. Sam, the Lane Technologies headquarters was a monument to modern architecture, all glass and steel and sharp angles, designed to look like the future had arrived early. Ethan had been inside dozens of times as a janitor, but always at night when the building was empty and quiet. During the day, it was a different beast entirely. The lobby buzzed with activity, employees in expensive suits rushing to meetings, visitors being escorted by security, screens displaying stock prices and news feeds. Ethan, in his best and only dress shirt, felt painfully out of place. "Mr. Cole," he turned to find a petite woman in her 50s approaching him. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and carried an iPad like it was an extension of her arm. "I'm Margaret Chen. Follow me, please." She led him to a private elevator that required a key card and a fingerprint scan. They rode up in silence, ascending past floor after floor until they reached the penthouse level, the executive suite. The doors opened onto a corridor that looked more like an art gallery than an office. Abstract paintings lined the walls, interspersed with windows that offered panoramic views of the city's skyline. At the end of the hallway was a set of double doors, and beyond them, Victoria Lane's office. It was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, a desk that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary, and enough empty space to play a game of basketball. But what struck him most was how impersonal it felt. No photos, no plants, no signs that an actual human being spent time here. Victoria stood by the window, her back to him. She was dressed immaculately, a tailored navy suit, hair pulled back in a sleek bun. The woman from the bar was gone. This was the CEO. "Leave us, Margaret." The assistant nodded and retreated, closing the doors behind her. Victoria turned around, and Ethan was struck again by the sharpness of her gaze. She looked better than she had 2 weeks ago, more composed, more controlled, but there was still something underneath, a storm held in check. "You came," she said. "You asked." "I wasn't sure you would. Most people would have assumed it was a prank or a trap." "Maybe I'm not most people." The ghost of a smile crossed her face. "No, that's becoming increasingly clear." She walked to her desk but didn't sit. Instead, she leaned against it, arms crossed, studying him with an intensity that made him want to squirm. "I'm going to ask you something, Ethan, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Why were you working as a janitor in my building?" The question caught him off guard. "I needed the money. They were hiring. I looked you up. Dr. Ethan Cole, graduate of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, board-certified emergency physician, 12 years of experience. You performed over 2,000 trauma surgeries. You had one of the highest patient survival rates in the state." She paused. "And then 3 years ago, you were sued for malpractice, lost your license, and disappeared." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He'd known this might come up eventually, but hearing his history laid out so clinically still stung. The lawsuit was dismissed. The patient's family was grieving and needed someone to blame. But the damage was done. "Yes. You lost everything." "Not everything." He thought of Emma, of her smile, of the way she still looked at him like he was a hero even though he felt like anything but. "I lost my career, but I didn't lose what mattered most." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, as if he'd passed some kind of test. "I have a daughter," Ethan continued, surprised to find himself volunteering the information. "Emma. She's 7. She has a degenerative condition affecting her hearing, congenital cholesteatoma. If she doesn't get surgery soon..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "That's why I'm working 2 jobs. 3, if you count the bar." "How much do you need?" "That's not why I'm telling you." "I know. How much?" $47,000. After insurance." Victoria didn't blink, didn't hesitate. "Done." "What?" "I'll cover the cost of your daughter's surgery. All of it." Ethan stared at her. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because I don't take charity, and because there's no way you're offering that kind of money without wanting something in return." For the first time, Victoria smiled. Really smiled. It transformed her face, made her look younger, more human. "You're right. I do want something." She pushed off from the desk and walked toward him. "I need a driver." "A driver?" "My previous driver was compromised. I discovered he was reporting my movements to Damien Cross. I can't trust anyone from the agency. I can't trust anyone in my own company. She stopped a few feet away from him. But something tells me I can trust you. Why? You barely know me. Because you didn't ask. That night at the bar, I was falling apart, and you could have pushed, could have pried, could have tried to use what you saw against me. Instead, you just drove me home. No questions. No agenda. She held his gaze. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing what she was offering. A job. Medical care for Emma. A chance to climb out of the hole he'd been slowly drowning in. What exactly would I be doing? Driving me. Being present at meetings. Watching. She paused. I know Damien is planning something. I just don't know what yet. I need someone who can observe, who can notice the things everyone else misses. Someone who isn't blinded by corporate politics or personal ambition. Another pause. Someone who used to save lives for a living. I'm not a detective. No, but you're a doctor. You're trained to look for symptoms, to see patterns, to diagnose problems before they become fatal. She took a step closer. My company is sick, Ethan. Someone is trying to kill it. I need you to help me figure out who and how before it's too late. It was insane. He knew it was insane. He was a bartender, a janitor, a disgraced doctor barely keeping his head above water. He had no business getting involved in corporate espionage or billion-dollar power plays. But then he thought about Emma, about her surgery, about the mounting bills and the sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of feeling like he was failing her every single day. And he thought about Victoria, about the desperation in her eyes that night at the bar, about the way she'd looked at him like he was the first person in years to treat her like a human being instead of a CEO. If I do this, he said slowly, I have conditions. Name them. Emma comes first, always. If she needs me, I'm gone. No questions asked. Agreed. And I won't lie. Not to you, not for you. If I see something wrong, I'll say it, even if you don't want to hear it. That's exactly what I'm counting on. And the money for the surgery? It's a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back. Victoria tilted her head. Why does that matter? Because I don't want to owe you. I don't want this to be something you can hold over me. If I'm going to help you, it has to be because I choose to, not because I'm bought and paid for. She studied him for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. Deal. Ethan took her hand and shook it. Her grip was firm, confident. The grip of someone who was used to winning. When do I start? Now. She walked back to her desk and pressed a button on her phone. Margaret, please have a car brought around. Mr. Cole will be joining me for the rest of the day. She looked at Ethan, and something flickered in her eyes. Something that might have been hope. Welcome to Lane Technologies, Ethan. Try to keep up. The first week was a blur. Ethan quickly learned that being Victoria Lane's driver meant being her shadow. He drove her to meetings. He waited outside boardrooms. He sat in the car during her 3 a.m. phone calls. He watched as she moved through her world like a general surveying a battlefield, always alert, always calculating, always alone. He also learned that Victoria Lane was not an easy woman to work for. She was demanding, precise, expected perfection, and had little patience for anything less. She could reduce a room full of executives to nervous silence with a single look, and she had a way of asking questions that made you feel like she already knew all your secrets. But underneath all that, underneath the armor and the intensity and the relentless drive, Ethan began to see glimpses of something else. He saw it when she stayed late to personally review grant applications for medical research. He saw it when she spent an hour on the phone with a single mother whose daughter had been helped by an early version of Project Helios. He saw it in the way she talked about the technology, not as a product or a profit center, but as a mission, a calling. Victoria Lane was many things. Cold wasn't one of them. She'd just built walls so high that most people couldn't see over them. Ethan could. He started noticing things, little things that others might have dismissed. The way Victoria's assistant, Margaret, tensed up whenever Damien Cross entered the room. The late-night meetings that weren't on any official calendar. The subtle pattern of emails being deleted shortly after they were sent. And he noticed Damien. Damien Cross was everything Victoria was not. Charming, smooth, effortlessly likable. He had the kind of smile that made people want to trust him, and he used it liberally. The other executives adored him. The board respected him. Even the janitors and security guards spoke well of him. But something about him made Ethan's skin crawl. It was in the eyes, he decided. Damien's eyes never matched his smile. When he laughed, his eyes stayed flat, calculating. When he offered sympathy, his eyes were already looking for an advantage. He was a man wearing a mask, and Ethan, who had spent years reading patients' faces for signs of hidden distress, could see it clearly. "You're staring," Ethan blinked. They were in the car, stopped at a red light, and Victoria was watching him in the rearview mirror. "Sorry, thinking." "About what?" "Damien Cross. I was watching him in that meeting, the way he interacted with the department heads." Victoria's expression sharpened. "And?" "He's grooming them, building loyalty. Half the room was looking to him for cues before they responded to you." Ethan paused. "He's not just planning a takeover. He's already started one." Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then she leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. "I know. I've known for months. I just couldn't prove it or figure out how to stop it." "Why haven't you fired him?" "Because I can't, not without cause. And Damien is very, very good at covering his tracks." She opened her eyes. "The board adores him. Half of them think he should be running the company instead of me. If I move against him without ironclad evidence, it'll look like paranoia, like a power play. And then he'll have exactly what he needs to push me out." "So we get evidence." "How? He's been doing this for years. He knows every system, every loophole, every way to hide what he's doing." Ethan thought about it, about the symptoms he'd observed, about the patterns that didn't quite fit. "His assistant," he said suddenly, "the nervous one. Rachel. Rachel Mercer. She's been with him for 3 years. She's scared of him. I've seen the way she flinches when he raises his voice. The way she avoids being alone with him." Ethan met Victoria's eyes in the mirror. People who are scared are also people who know things they might be willing to share if they felt safe. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then slowly she smiled. "You really aren't like most people, are you?" "I'm just paying attention." "That's exactly what I needed." She leaned forward. "Find out what Rachel knows. Carefully. If Damien's suspects were onto him, he'll accelerate his timeline and we'll lose everything." Ethan nodded. "I'll be careful." "And Ethan?" He looked at her. "Thank you for seeing what others don't." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded and turned his attention back to the road. Behind him, Victoria Lane stared out the window at the city lights and allowed herself, for the first time in months, to hope. The breakthrough came on a Thursday. Ethan was in the parking garage doing a routine check of Victoria's car, a habit he developed after finding a tracking device under the chassis during his second week, when he heard footsteps echoing in the concrete structure. He looked up to see Rachel Mercer hurrying toward her car. She was clutching her purse like a lifeline, her eyes red-rimmed, her movements jerky and rushed. "Rachel!" She jumped at the sound of her name, spinning around with fear written all over her face. When she saw it was Ethan, some of the terror faded, replaced by wary confusion. "You're Ms. Lane's driver." "Ethan Cole." He held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. "You okay? You look upset." "I'm fine." The words came too fast, too automatic. "Just late for an appointment." "At 7 p.m.? She hesitated. Ethan could see the internal debate, the fear of speaking warring with the desperate need to unburden herself. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "And can you promise it won't get back to him?" "I promise." She glanced around the garage as if expecting Damien to materialize from the shadows. Then she stepped closer. "He's making me do things. Sign off on documents I'm not supposed to see. Delete emails. Arrange meetings that never appear on any calendar." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know what it meant at first, but I've been paying attention, and I think he's stealing from the company or selling something. I don't know exactly what, but it's big, and it's wrong." "Have you told anyone?" "Who would I tell? He owns half the executive team. The board thinks he walks on water, and Miss Lane..." She shook her head. He's always talking about how she's losing her grip, how she's becoming paranoid, how it's only a matter of time before the board sees what he sees. What do you see, Rachel? She met his eyes, and he saw something he recognized, the same desperate determination he'd seen in Victoria that first night. I see a man who's going to destroy everything Miss Lane has built, and I'm terrified that no one is going to stop him. Ethan made a decision. What if I told you there was someone who wanted to stop him? Someone who's been looking for proof? Rachel's eyes widened. Ms. Lane? She knows something's wrong. She just can't prove it. But if you have access to the things he's been hiding... He let the implication hang in the air. Rachel was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. I've been copying things. Just in case. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but... She pressed the drive into Ethan's hand. Everything's on there. The emails, the documents, the meeting recordings he thought were deleted. Her voice dropped. He's selling Project Helios to Meridian Health. The deal is supposed to close next month. The board doesn't know. Ms. Lane doesn't know. It's all happening in secret. Ethan looked at the flash drive, such a small thing to hold so much destruction. Why are you giving this to me? Because I can't do this anymore, and because... She swallowed hard. My mother died last year. Cancer. She was diagnosed late. Too late. Ms. Lane's technology could have caught it earlier, could have saved her. Tears slid down her cheeks. I'm not going to let Damien Cross take that away from other families. I'm not. Ethan pocketed the flash drive. You're brave, Rachel. Braver than you know. Just keep me out of it if you can. I can't afford to lose this job. I'll do everything I can. He met her eyes. And Rachel? Thank you. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and hurried to her car. Within moments, she was gone. Ethan stood alone in the garage, the flash drive burning a hole in his pocket, and realized that everything was about to change. So, he brought the drive to Victoria that night. They sat in her penthouse apartment, a space that felt even emptier than her office, and watched as she plugged it into her laptop. The files were damning. Emails coordinating with Meridian Health executives, financial documents showing shell companies designed to funnel money, board presentations that had been doctored to hide the true state of the company's finances. And at the center of it all, Damien Cross. Victoria's face was unreadable as she scrolled through the evidence, but her hands were shaking. He's been planning this for 2 years, she said quietly. 2 years, and I never saw it. You weren't supposed to. That was the whole point. I trusted him. I brought him into my company, my inner circle, my life. She slammed the laptop shut. I'm such a fool. No, you're human. You trusted the wrong person. It happens. Not to me. Not anymore. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The city sprawled out below them, millions of lights glittering in the darkness. This is enough to stop him. This is enough to take to the board, to the authorities, to... Victoria. Something in his voice made her stop, turn around. This is also enough for him to know that someone betrayed him. If you move on this now without a plan, he'll figure out it was Rachel, and I promised her I would keep her safe. Victoria's jaw tightened. For a moment, Ethan thought she was going to argue, to prioritize the company over one scared assistant, but then she sighed and the fight seemed to drain out of her. You're right. I know you're right. She walked back to the couch and sat down heavily. We need a plan, a way to expose him without destroying everyone in the crossfire. We'll figure it out. Will we? She looked at him, and for the first time he saw the vulnerability she worked so hard to hide. I've spent my entire life building things. I don't know how to fight wars. Then learn. You're Victoria Lane. You don't know how to give up. Something flickered in her eyes. Something warm. Something grateful. How do you do that? Do what? Make me believe that everything might actually be okay. Ethan didn't have an answer, so he just sat there beside her as the night stretched on and the city lights continued to glitter below. They would figure it out. They had to. Because somewhere across town, a 7-year-old girl was sleeping, unaware that her father was caught up in something bigger than either of them had ever imagined. And Emma. Emma was worth fighting for. They all were. The rain had finally stopped. Outside Victoria's window, the first hints of dawn were beginning to paint the sky. Ethan had lost track of how long they'd been talking, planning, strategizing, mapping out the battlefield ahead. His phone buzzed. A text from the babysitter he'd hired for the night. Emma had a good night. Still sleeping. She asked about you before bed. He stared at the message for a moment, feeling that familiar ache in his chest. Your daughter. He looked up. Victoria was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Yeah, Emma. She's the reason for all of this. Tell me about her. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a demand either. It was something in between, an invitation perhaps, an opening in walls that never opened. So Ethan told her. He told her about Emma's laugh, high and bright, even as her hearing faded, about her drawings stuck to every surface of their tiny apartment, about the way she still made him coffee every morning, even though she was too young to work the machine and always put in too much sugar. He told her about the diagnosis, the surgery, the countdown that hung over everything like a guillotine. And when he was done, Victoria was quiet for a long time. She sounds remarkable, she said finally. She is. You're a good father, Ethan. I'm trying to be. No. Victoria leaned forward, her gaze intense. You are. Whatever else you've lost, whatever else the world has taken from you, you're a good father. Don't ever doubt that. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Thank you, he said. That means more than you know. Victoria nodded, then, almost hesitantly, she asked, Would you like to bring her by sometime, Emma? I'd like to meet her. It was such a small thing, such a simple invitation, but it felt like something much bigger. I'd like that, Ethan said. She'd like that too. Victoria smiled. It was soft, uncertain, nothing like the razor-sharp confidence she showed the rest of the world. But it was real. Then it's a date, she said. And as the sun rose over the city, casting golden light through the windows, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just fighting for Emma anymore. He was fighting for Victoria too. And maybe, just maybe, he was finally fighting for himself. 3 weeks into his new life, Ethan Cole had learned that Victoria Lane existed on exactly 4 hours of sleep, 12 cups of black coffee, and a determination that bordered on supernatural. He had also learned that she was lonely in a way that most people would never understand. It wasn't the loneliness of having no one around. Victoria was surrounded by people constantly. Assistants, executives, board members, journalists, investors. Her calendar was a battlefield of 15-minute meetings stacked back-to-back from dawn until well past midnight. She was never truly alone, but she was always isolated. Ethan saw it in the way conversation stopped when she entered a room. In the careful, measured responses people gave her, never quite honest, never quite real. In the way her own employees looked at her with a mixture of admiration and fear, as if she were a statue rather than a person. She had built an empire, and in doing so, she had built a cage around herself. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything began to shift. They were stuck in traffic on the way back from a meeting with potential investors. The kind of meeting that had gone well on paper, but had left Victoria staring out the window with that particular expression Ethan had come to recognize. The expression that meant she was replaying every word, every gesture, every subtle indication of where loyalties might lie. The one in the gray suit, she said suddenly. Harrison, did you notice how he kept checking his phone? Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Every time you mentioned the timeline for Project Helios going public. He's reporting to someone. Probably Damien, possibly Meridian directly. She leaned her head against the window. They're everywhere. I can't tell anymore who's actually on my side and who's just waiting for the right moment to put a knife in my back. Not everyone is against you. How do you know? Because I'm not. Margaret's not. Rachel took an enormous risk to help you. Ethan stopped at a red light and turned to face her. You're not alone in this, Victoria. You just have to stop acting like you are. She met his eyes, and for a moment the mask slipped. He saw the exhaustion underneath, the fear, the desperate hope that she kept locked away from everyone else. Do you know what it's like? She asked quietly. To spend 15 years building something, only to watch it being stolen from you piece by piece? To know that the person you trusted most in the world has been lying to you from the very beginning? No, Ethan admitted. But I know what it's like to lose everything you've built, to watch your whole life collapse and wonder if any of it was real. Your career, my marriage, my sense of who I was. He turned back to the road as the light changed. 3 years ago, I was Dr. Ethan Cole. I had a purpose, an identity. And then one night, a patient died on my table. Not because I did anything wrong, the court eventually agreed on that, but because sometimes people die and someone has to be blamed. What happened? His family sued. The hospital's lawyers decided it was easier to settle than to fight, which meant I became the scapegoat. Lost my license pending review, lost my position, lost my wife shortly after because she couldn't handle being married to a man who was no longer who she'd signed up for. He paused. Emma was 4. She's the only reason I kept going. Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. I'm sorry, I didn't know the details. You read my file. Files don't tell you what it felt like. She leaned forward slightly. How did you survive it? The falling? Ethan considered the question. It was the kind of question he'd asked himself countless times during those first dark months, when the world had seemed determined to crush him into dust. I stopped trying to hold on to what I'd lost, he said finally, and started focusing on what I still had. Emma needed a father. I couldn't be a doctor anymore, but I could still be that, so that's what I became. That simple? No, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but sometimes the simple answers are the right ones, even when they're not easy. Traffic began to move again. The city slid past them, glass towers reaching toward a sky that couldn't decide whether to rain or shine. I don't know how to let go, Victoria said. Lane Technologies is all I have. It's all I've ever had. If I lose it, you won't. You can't promise that. No, Ethan agreed. But I can promise that whatever happens, you won't face it alone. Not anymore. She didn't respond. But when he glanced in the mirror, he saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. The first real hope he'd seen since the night she'd walked into Sullivan's bar. That evening, Victoria did something unprecedented. She canceled her remaining meetings. Margaret nearly dropped her iPad when Victoria announced it. In the 3 years Margaret had worked as her executive assistant, Victoria Lane had never voluntarily canceled anything. She had conducted conference calls from hospital beds, taken investor meetings while running a fever of 103, and once famously closed a major acquisition while her appendix was actively trying to kill her. But today, she simply walked past Margaret's desk, said, "Clear my schedule for the rest of the evening," and kept walking. "Ms. Lane," Margaret hurried after her. "Is everything all right? Should I be concerned about—" "Everything is fine, Margaret. I'm just—" Victoria paused, as if searching for the right word. "Taking your advice." "My advice?" "You've been telling me for years that I need to take breaks. Apparently, you were right." She glanced back with the ghost of a smile. "Don't let it go to your head." Margaret watched her go, utterly bewildered. Then she turned to Ethan, who was standing nearby reviewing the next day's schedule. "What did you do to her?" she asked. "I have no idea what you mean." "She canceled meetings, Ethan. Voluntarily. In the 15 years I've known her, she's never once—" Margaret stopped, studying him with new interest. "You're good for her. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm just driving her around." "No." Margaret shook her head. "You're doing a lot more than that. You're making her remember she's human." Before Ethan could respond, Victoria reappeared in the doorway. She had changed from her business attire into something more casual, dark jeans, a simple white blouse, and she looked almost like a different person, softer, younger. "Ethan, do you have plans tonight?" "I was going to pick up Emma from Mrs. Patterson's and make dinner." "Would you mind if I joined you?" The question hung in the air. Margaret's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. "I'd like that. Emma would too." "Good." Victoria grabbed her coat. "Then let's go meet your daughter." The drive to Mrs. Patterson's apartment took 20 minutes. Victoria spent most of it unusually quiet, her fingers drumming nervously against her knee. "You're anxious," Ethan observed. "I'm fine." You've checked your phone 12 times in the last 5 minutes, and you haven't looked at a single message. Victoria let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Is this what you do? Notice everything? Occupational hazard, both of my former occupations, actually. I'm not anxious, I'm just... She trailed off, seeming to search for the right word. I'm not good with children. I never have been. I don't know how to talk to them, how to relate to them. The few times I've been around friends' kids, I felt like I was interviewing them for a job position. Emma's 7. She doesn't want to be interviewed, she just wants to be seen. What does that mean? It means she spent her whole life being treated differently because of her hearing. Doctors examine her like she's a puzzle to be solved. Teachers speak slowly and loudly like she's fragile. Other kids either avoid her or treat her like a curiosity. Ethan pulled into the parking lot of Mrs. Patterson's building. What she wants, what she needs, is for people to look at her and see Emma, not her condition, not her limitations, just her. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I think I understand that more than you know. Mrs. Patterson was a kind-faced woman in her 60s who had been watching Emma since Ethan started working nights. She greeted them at the door with a knowing smile that suggested she had opinions about Victoria's presence, but was too polite to voice them. Emma's in the living room, she said. She's been drawing pictures all afternoon. Something about a princess who builds robots. That's her latest obsession, Ethan explained to Victoria as they walked inside. She wants to be an engineer when she grows up, or a dragon. She hasn't decided yet. Victoria smiled. It was the uncertain smile of someone who wasn't used to smiling but was trying anyway. They found Emma curled up on the couch, surrounded by an explosion of crayons and paper. She was 7 years old with her father's dark hair and her mother's eyes, though Ethan never mentioned that last part. She was also wearing an oversized superhero t-shirt, mismatched socks, and the slightly too large hearing aids that she decorated with butterfly stickers. Daddy! She looked up at the sound of his footsteps, her face splitting into a grin. Then she noticed Victoria, and her expression shifted to curious assessment. Who's that? Ethan knelt down to her level. This is Victoria. She's my friend from work. I told you about her, remember? Emma studied Victoria with the unnerving directness that only children possess. You're the important lady, the one who makes computer doctors. Victoria blinked. Computer doctors? Daddy said you make computers that help find when people are sick. That's like a computer doctor. Yes, I suppose that's accurate. Victoria crouched down awkwardly, clearly out of her element. It's nice to meet you, Emma. Your father talks about you all the time. He talks about you too. Emma held up the drawing she'd been working on. I made this for you. The picture was a riot of color. A tall figure with dark hair standing next to a smaller figure with butterfly hearing aids, both of them surrounded by what appeared to be robots and rainbows and at least 3 dragons. That's you, Emma said, pointing to the tall figure. And that's me. And those are the computer doctors, but I made them look like robots because I don't know what computer doctors actually look like. Victoria took the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. For a long moment, she just stared at it, and Ethan saw something in her expression that made his heart ache. When was the last time someone had given Victoria Lane a gift? Not a business present, not a strategic gesture, but something given freely, with no expectation of return? It's beautiful, Victoria said, and her voice was thick. Thank you, Emma. I'll treasure it. Emma beamed. Do you want to stay for dinner? Daddy makes really good spaghetti. It's the only thing he knows how to cook. Hey, Ethan protested. I also make excellent grilled cheese. Grilled cheese isn't cooking, it's just melting stuff. Victoria laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of her, and it transformed her face completely. She looked younger, lighter, human. I would love to stay for dinner, she said, if that's okay with your father. Emma turned to Ethan with an expression of exaggerated pleading. Please, Daddy, please, please, please. Well, Ethan said, fighting a smile, I suppose I can manage to melt some extra cheese. Dinner was chaos in the best possible way. The apartment was small, a 2-bedroom unit in a building that had seen better decades. But Emma filled it with her energy, chattering away about school and her drawings, and the deaf superhero she'd invented called Captain Soundwave, who could see sound waves and turn them into weapons. Victoria, to Ethan's surprise, kept up with all of it. She asked questions. Real questions, not the patronizing kind that adults often ask children. She wanted to know about Captain Soundwave's origin story, about the technical specifications of Emma's robot designs, about which dragon from her drawings would win in a fight, and why. And Emma, who usually retreated into shyness around strangers, opened up like a flower in sunlight. "Daddy says you work a lot," Emma said, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "Like a lot. Do you ever get tired?" "Sometimes," Victoria admitted, "but I love what I do, so it doesn't feel like work most of the time." "That's what Daddy says about being a doctor. He misses it." Emma said this matter-of-factly, with the casual brutality of childhood honesty. "He doesn't talk about it, but I can tell. Sometimes he watches those hospital shows and gets really quiet." Ethan felt his face flush. "Emma, it's okay, Daddy. Being sad about stuff doesn't mean you're not happy now." She turned back to Victoria. "He's happy now. I can tell that too." Victoria's eyes met Ethan's across the table. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared wounds, shared recovery, shared hope. "I'm glad," Victoria said softly. "You have a very special dad, Emma." "I know," Emma grinned. "He's the best dad in the whole world, even when he burns the grilled cheese." After dinner, Victoria helped with the dishes while Emma worked on a new drawing at the kitchen table. It was such a domestic scene, so utterly normal, that Ethan had to keep reminding himself that the woman drying plates beside him was worth several $billion and ran one of the most innovative companies in the country. "She's remarkable," Victoria said quietly, watching Emma work. "You've done an incredible job with her." "She's done an incredible job with me. I'm not sure I'd have survived the last 3 years without her." "The surgery. How much time do we have?" The question brought reality crashing back. For a few hours, Ethan had almost forgotten the countdown, the looming deadline, the shadow that hung over everything. 4 months? Maybe 5. After that, the damage becomes permanent. And the money? Still short. About 30,000. He forced a smile. "I'll figure it out. I always do." Victoria set down the dish she was drying. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. "I told you I would cover the surgery. And I told you I don't take charity. This isn't charity. This is..." She paused, searching for the right word. "This is me investing in something that matters. You've helped me more in 3 weeks than most people have in 15 years. Let me help you back." Victoria's tea. "Ethan." She turned to face him fully. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I live in a penthouse that feels like a mausoleum. I have employees who fear me, competitors who want to destroy me, and until very recently, not a single person in my life who saw me as anything other than a CEO." Her voice cracked slightly. "You and Emma, you've shown me what I've been missing, what I gave up to build my empire. Let me do this. Not because I pity you or because I feel obligated, but because it matters to me. Because she matters to me." She gestured towards Emma, who was now so absorbed in her drawing that she was oblivious to the adult conversation happening 3 feet away. "I don't know how to be part of a family," Victoria continued. "I've never had one, not really. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try. I'd like to be someone in her life. In your life." She swallowed hard. "Please." It was the please that got him. Victoria Lane didn't say please. She commanded, she demanded, she expected. But right now, standing in his cramped kitchen with dish soap suds on her designer blouse, she was just a woman asking for something she desperately needed. Connection. "Okay," Ethan said. "But the money is still a loan." "Of course. And I'm not doing this because of the surgery. I'm doing this because..." He glanced at Emma, then back at Victoria. "Because she asked if you were staying, and I realized I wanted you to say yes." Victoria's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that she clearly wasn't used to showing. "I'd like to say yes," she whispered. "If you'll let me." Before Ethan could respond, Emma looked up from her drawing. "Are you going to kiss now? Because that's what happens in the movies when people look at each other like that." Ethan choked on air. Victoria turned an impressive shade of red. We're not, we weren't, Ethan stammered. It's okay if you do. Emma shrugged with the casual indifference of a 7-year-old who had already moved on to more important matters. I drew another picture. This one has a castle. Do you want to see? Victoria seized the change of subject like a lifeline. I would love to see. As she crossed the room to look at Emma's latest creation, she glanced back at Ethan with an expression that made his heart skip. Later, he thought, they would talk about this later. But first there was a castle to admire. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that Ethan hadn't expected. His job as Victoria's driver expanded organically, becoming something harder to define. He was her driver, yes, but also her confidant, her strategist, her eyes and ears in rooms she couldn't access. He sat in on meetings as an invisible presence, noting the subtle tells that others missed. He compiled observations into reports that Victoria studied like battle plans, and increasingly, he was something else entirely. He was her friend. Their dinners with Emma became a regular occurrence, every Thursday and Sunday, unless an emergency demanded Victoria's attention. Mrs. Patterson started keeping extra groceries on hand, joking that she should start charging rent for how often the important lady came to visit. Emma, for her part, had decided that Victoria was the most fascinating person she had ever met. She knows everything, Emma declared one evening. I asked her how computers think, and she explained it for like an hour, and now I understand. She should be a teacher. She has a company to run, Ethan pointed out. She could do both. She's really smart. And Victoria, who had spent her entire adult life being admired from a distance and feared up close, blossomed under Emma's unconditional acceptance. She brought gifts, books about engineering, a child's microscope, art supplies that cost more than Ethan's weekly groceries. When Ethan protested that she was spoiling his daughter, Victoria simply replied, I have no one else to spoil. Let me have this. It wasn't just the gifts, though. It was the attention. Victoria listened to Emma's stories with genuine interest, asked questions that encouraged her to think deeper, celebrated her small achievements as if they were major accomplishments. She was awkward at first, uncertain how to navigate the terrain of childhood, but she learned quickly, as she did everything. And Emma's hearing aids got new stickers every week. Butterflies gave way to stars, then robots, then a combination of all three. Victoria helped her apply them, their heads bent together in concentration while Ethan watched from the kitchen doorway, his heart so full it hurt. But the shadow of Damien Cross remained. The evidence Rachel had provided was damning, but Victoria knew she couldn't use it directly without exposing her source. They needed more. They needed proof that would stand up in court, that would convince the board, that would be undeniable. So they watched, and waited, and planned. Ethan became skilled at eavesdropping, lingering in hallways during executive conversations, positioning himself at strategic angles during meetings. He noticed things that security cameras missed, the nervousness of certain board members, the late-night visitors to Damien's office, the encrypted phones that appeared and disappeared. He also noticed something else. Damien had started watching him. It was subtle at first, a lingering glance, a casual question about Ethan's background, an unexpected interest in his schedule. But over time, it became more pointed. Your driver, Damien said to Victoria one afternoon, as Ethan stood waiting by the elevator. Ethan Cole, isn't it? Interesting background, medical degree, malpractice suit, fell quite far from grace. Victoria's expression didn't flicker. Is there a point to this observation? Just curious why you'd hire someone with such a complicated history. Most CEOs prefer drivers without drama. I prefer drivers who show up on time and don't ask unnecessary questions. Ethan does both. Damien smiled. It was the smile Ethan had come to recognize, the one that never reached his eyes. Of course, I'm sure he's perfectly harmless. Later in the car, Victoria's composure cracked. He suspects something. He suspects everything, Ethan replied. It's how men like him operate. The question is what he's going to do about it. He'll dig. He'll find connections. He'll try to figure out why I hired you and what you might know. Victoria rubbed her temples. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should have kept my distance from you, from Emma. Victoria. Ethan stopped at a red light and turned to face her. Listen to me. Whatever happens, I don't regret any of this. Not the job, not the investigation, not... He paused. Not any of it. She met his eyes. Neither do I. That's what scares me. I've spent my whole life keeping people at arm's length because it was safer. And now there are people I care about. People who could be used against me. Is that what Damien would do? Damien would burn down an orphanage if it gave him a strategic advantage. Victoria's voice was bitter. He has no conscience, no limits. If he figures out how much Emma means to me, how much you both mean to me, he'll use it. Then we take him down before he gets the chance. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm afraid, Ethan. I built my entire identity around being fearless, being untouchable. But right now, I'm terrified. Because I finally have something I can't afford to lose. Ethan reached back and took her hand. It was a small gesture, simple, human, but he felt her fingers tighten around his like a lifeline. You won't lose us, he said. I promise. It was a promise he meant with every fiber of his being, but even as he said it, he knew that Damien Cross was circling closer, and the storm was coming. The call came at 2 a.m. Ethan was in that twilight space between sleep and waking, his body exhausted from a 16-hour day, but his mind still churning through scenarios and strategies. When his phone buzzed on the nightstand, he answered without checking the caller ID. Hello? Ethan Cole? The voice was unfamiliar. Male, professional, clipped. Who is this? My name is Detective Marcus Webb, Boston Police Department. I'm calling about your daughter. The words hit him like a physical blow. He was fully awake in an instant, heart hammering against his ribs. Emma? What happened? Is she okay? She's fine, Mr. Cole. There's no emergency. But we received an anonymous tip that we were obligated to investigate. Concerns about the living conditions in your home, your ability to provide adequate care, your daughter's medical needs not being met. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. That's ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with my home. Emma is well cared for. Her medical needs... I understand, sir. As I said, we're obligated to investigate all tips. A social worker will be contacting you within the next 48 hours to schedule a home visit. I'd recommend having all relevant documentation ready. Medical records, school reports, anything that demonstrates appropriate care. After the detective hung up, Ethan sat in the darkness for a long time, his phone still pressed to his ear. An anonymous tip. He knew exactly who had made that call. The next morning, Victoria arrived at his apartment before dawn. Ethan had called her immediately after hanging up with the detective, and she'd insisted on coming over despite his protests that it could wait. Now she stood in his kitchen, her face pale with fury, while Ethan made coffee and tried to control the shaking of his hands. He's escalating, Victoria said. The investigation found nothing actionable, but Damien doesn't need actionable. He just needs to create chaos, to make you vulnerable, to show you that he can reach into your life whenever he wants. He's threatening my daughter. Ethan's voice was flat, controlled, but underneath it was a rage that frightened him with its intensity. He's using CPS as a weapon against a 7-year-old. I know. And we're going to stop him. How? We've been watching him for weeks and we still don't have enough to move against him. Meanwhile, he's already launched his first strike. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she walked over to where Ethan was standing and placed her hands on his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me, she said. I will not let anything happen to Emma. I will use every resource I have, call in every favor I'm owed, burn down my own company if I have to. That little girl is... Her voice caught. She matters to me. You both matter to me, and I will not let Damien Cross take that away. Victoria, I know you want to handle this yourself. I know you've spent 3 years proving that you don't need anyone's help. But this isn't weakness. Letting someone fight beside you isn't surrender. She held his gaze. Let me help, please. The word again, please. From a woman who never asked for anything. Ethan felt something crack inside him. The wall he'd built after his divorce, after losing his career, after learning that the world would take everything you loved if you let it. That wall crumbled just a little. Okay, he said. Okay. Victoria nodded. Some of the tension left her shoulders. First, we deal with CPS. I have lawyers who specialize in these situations. They'll make sure the investigation goes nowhere. She began pacing, her mind clearly shifting into strategic mode. Second, we accelerate our timeline. I've been too cautious, waiting for perfect evidence. That's a luxury we can no longer afford. What are you thinking? Rachel mentioned that Damien keeps his real records in a private server, off-site, encrypted, separate from the company network. If we can access that server, how do we even find it? Victoria smiled, and there was something dangerous in it. I know someone who can help. Someone Damien would never suspect. Who? Me. Victoria pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Damien thinks I'm oblivious. He thinks I've been so focused on the public face of the company that I've missed what's happening behind the scenes. He doesn't know that I've been building my own network of loyalists, people who report to me directly, outside the official chain of command. You have spies in your own company? I have insurance. There's a difference. She looked up from her phone. One of my people in IT has been tracking Damien's digital movements for months. She's close to pinpointing the location of his private server. Once we have that, we can get everything we need. And then? And then we end this, publicly, permanently, and in a way that ensures he never threatens anyone I care about again. Ethan studied her face, the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the fire that burned underneath her controlled exterior. You're terrifying when you're angry, he said. Good. Damien should be terrified. She stepped closer to him. I've spent 15 years playing by the rules, being professional, being measured. That's over. He came after your daughter. He came after my family. The word hung in the air between them. Family. She seemed to realize what she'd said, and for a moment uncertainty flickered across her face. I know what you mean, Ethan said. And you're right, that's what we are. Victoria's breath caught. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hope and fear and something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. We should check on Emma, she said finally. I'd feel better knowing she's safe. They walked together to Emma's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. The nightlight cast soft shadows across her face, and her butterfly-stickered hearing aids rested on the nightstand beside her. She's beautiful, Victoria whispered. How could anyone want to hurt something so beautiful? Because some people are broken in ways that can't be fixed. They see innocence as weakness. They mistake cruelty for strength. I won't let him touch her, Ethan. Whatever it costs, I won't. He reached out and took her hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers intertwined with his like they belonged there. They stood like that for a long time, watching over the sleeping child who had somehow, without trying, brought two broken people together. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as family. The social worker came 3 days later. Her name was Dorothy Chen, and she was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who had clearly seen every form of neglect and abuse that human beings were capable of inflicting on children. She walked through Ethan's apartment with a clipboard, taking notes, asking questions in a voice that was professionally neutral but not unkind. Ethan had prepared for this. Victoria's lawyers had coached him on what to say, what documents to have ready, how to present his home in the best possible light. The apartment was spotless. Emma's school records were impeccable. Her doctor had provided a letter confirming that her medical needs were being actively addressed. Mr. Cole, Dorothy said, settling onto his couch with her clipboard, I want to be direct with you. The tip we received was vague and contained several claims that are clearly false. Your daughter appears healthy, happy, and well cared for. Your home is clean and safe. By every metric I can assess, you're doing an excellent job under difficult circumstances. Ethan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Thank you. That said, I do have some concerns. Dorothy's expression became more serious. The tip mentioned something about your daughter's upcoming surgery. Can you tell me about that? Emma has a condition called cholesteatoma. It's a type of abnormal skin growth in the middle ear. Without surgery, she'll lose her hearing completely. And the surgery is scheduled for when? As soon as possible. We're working with Boston General to finalize a date. The tip suggested that you might not be able to afford the procedure, that your financial situation is precarious. Ethan hesitated. This was the trap. The place where Damien's manipulation became clear. If Ethan admitted financial struggles, it could be used as evidence of inability to provide. But if he lied, and the lie was discovered, it would be worse. "I won't lie to you," he said finally. 6 months ago, that would have been true. But circumstances have changed. I have a new position with a steady income, and the surgery costs have been addressed through personal loans and assistance from my employer. Dorothy made a note on her clipboard. "Your employer? That would be Victoria Lane." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes. Ms. Lane is quite wealthy, I understand." "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything, Mr. Cole. I'm just noting that your relationship with Ms. Lane seems to extend beyond the professional." Dorothy looked up from her clipboard. "There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's probably beneficial for Emma to have additional support figures in her life. I'm just trying to understand the full picture." "The full picture is that I met Victoria when I was at my lowest point. She offered me a job when no one else would. And over time, we became friends. She's been incredibly kind to my daughter." Ethan held Dorothy's gaze. "Whatever else you've been told, that's the truth." Dorothy studied him for a long moment. Then she closed her clipboard and stood up. "Mr. Cole, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen real neglect, real abuse, children living in situations that would break your heart." She glanced around the apartment, at Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, the photos on the bookshelf, the carefully maintained space of a single father doing his best. "This isn't that. Not even close." "So what happens now?" "I file my report. Based on what I've observed, I'll be recommending that the case be closed with no further action." She picked up her bag. "Whoever made that tip, they weren't doing it out of concern for your daughter. They were doing it to hurt you." "I know." "People like that," Dorothy shook her head. "They usually don't stop with one attempt. Be careful, Mr. Cole, and document everything. If there are future incidents, you'll want a paper trail." After she left, Ethan sat on his couch and let his head fall into his hands. The relief was overwhelming, but underneath it was something else. Damien's first strike had failed. That meant a second strike was coming. The server location came through a week later. Victoria's IT contact had traced Damien's private network to a data center in a nondescript building in Cambridge, a place that processed thousands of legitimate business accounts and was therefore virtually invisible. The server was protected by multiple layers of encryption, but Rachel had provided passwords that she'd copied during her years as Damien's assistant. The plan was simple: access the server, download everything, and compile it into a package that would be undeniable. The execution was anything but. "I should be the one to do it," Victoria said. They were in her penthouse, maps and diagrams spread across her dining table like a military operation. "If anyone is caught accessing that server, it should be me. I'm the CEO. I have at least plausible authority to investigate potential corporate malfeasance. And if Damien has people watching the facility, if he's anticipated this, then I'll deal with it." Ethan shook his head. "Victoria, you're the most recognizable face in this company. The moment you set foot in that building, everyone will know." "Then what do you suggest?" "I go. I'm a nobody, a driver. No one looks twice at the hired help." "Absolutely not. If something goes wrong, then it goes wrong for me, not for you." Ethan leaned forward. "Think about it strategically. If I'm caught, Damien can't prove anything. I'm just a disgruntled employee acting on my own. If you're caught, he has exactly what he needs to accelerate the board takeover." Victoria was silent for a long moment. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the desire to protect him warring with the logic of his argument. "I don't like it," she said finally. "You don't have to like it. You just have to let me do it." "What about Emma? If something happens to you, nothing is going to happen." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I spent 12 years making split-second decisions in emergency rooms. I've held people's lives in my hands. I know how to handle pressure. This isn't a hospital. No, it's more important than that." He squeezed her hand. "This is about protecting our family. You, me, Emma. I won't let Damien take that away." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "We do this your way. But I'm going to have backup in place. Security I trust, lawyers on standby, everything we need if things go sideways. I wouldn't expect anything less. And Ethan? She held his gaze. Come back to me. Promise me. I promise. He meant it. God, he meant it. But he also knew that promises didn't always survive contact with reality. The data center was exactly as nondescript as Victoria's contact had described. A beige building in an office park, surrounded by insurance companies and accounting firms. Ethan arrived at 11 p.m., dressed in the uniform of a maintenance worker and carrying a toolbox that contained a laptop and several data storage drives. His cover story was simple. He was there to perform routine HVAC maintenance on behalf of the building management company. The credentials Victoria's team had forged were flawless. The security guard at the front desk barely looked up from his phone. Sign in, 3rd floor. Ethan signed a fake name and took the elevator up. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. Years of emergency medicine had taught him how to function under pressure, how to compartmentalize fear and focus on the task at hand. The server room was at the end of a long hallway, behind a door that required a keycard. Rachel's passwords worked perfectly. Ethan slipped inside and found himself surrounded by the hum of cooling systems and the blinking lights of thousands of servers. Damien's private setup was in the corner, a dedicated rack separate from the main systems. Ethan connected his laptop, entered the encryption keys, and watched as 15 years of secrets began downloading to his drives. Emails, financial records, meeting recordings, evidence of the Meridian deal, of kickbacks and bribes, of systematic manipulation of Lane Technologies' stock price. Everything they needed. The download was 80% complete when the door opened. Ethan spun around to find himself face-to-face with Damien Cross. Damien looked exactly as he did in the office, perfectly groomed, perfectly composed, perfectly calm. He was flanked by 2 security guards who definitely weren't the building's regular staff. Dr. Cole, Damien said, his voice carrying that silky menace that Ethan had come to despise. I must admit, I'm impressed. I expected Victoria to try something eventually, but I didn't expect her to send her lapdog to do it. Damien. Ethan kept his voice level. I don't know what you think is happening here. Please, we're past the point of pretense. Damien stepped closer, and the guards moved with him. I've known about Victoria's little investigation for weeks. Did you really think my assistant could copy files without me noticing? Rachel's loyalty was always negotiable. The download was at 90%. 92. Ethan needed to buy time. If you knew, why didn't you stop it sooner? Because I wanted to see how far Victoria would go, and because I wanted to know who she trusted. Damien smiled that reptilian smile. Now I know. It's you. The washed-up doctor, the single father, the man who has absolutely nothing to lose except, of course, his daughter. Ethan felt his blood run cold. Leave Emma out of this. I would love to. Really, I would. Children should be protected, cherished, kept safe from the ugliness of the adult world. Damien's smile widened. But you've made that impossible, Dr. Cole. You've inserted yourself into affairs that were never your concern. You've allied yourself with a woman who is too stubborn to accept defeat gracefully. And now there must be consequences. 97%. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Control of Lane Technologies and everything it represents. Victoria can resign gracefully with a generous severance package and the illusion that it was her choice. Or she can fight and watch everything she loves be destroyed. Damien stepped even closer, close enough that Ethan could smell his cologne. Starting with that precious little girl who has already lost so much. Something snapped inside Ethan. He moved without thinking, 12 years of ER instincts taking over. His fist connected with Damien's jaw in a satisfying crack that sent the CFO stumbling backward. Before the guards could react, Ethan grabbed his laptop and the now completed download and ran. The next few minutes were chaos, alarms blaring, footsteps pounding, shouted orders echoing through concrete hallways. Ethan ran on pure adrenaline, taking corners he'd memorized from the building plans, heading for an emergency exit that led to a maintenance corridor. He burst through the door and found himself in a parking lot. A car was waiting. Victoria's backup plan. A nondescript sedan with a driver who asked no questions. Drive, Ethan gasped, throwing himself into the back seat. Now! They were 3 blocks away before Ethan allowed himself to breathe. He looked down at the laptop in his hands, at the drives that held everything they needed to destroy Damien Cross. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This isn't over. Enjoy your victory while you can. When I'm finished, you'll wish you'd never heard the name Victoria Lane. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. Then he deleted it and called Victoria. I got it, he said. Everything, but Damien knows. Are you safe? For now, but he made threats. About Emma. There was a long pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was ice. Then we end this. Tonight. Whatever it takes. Victoria, he threatened our daughter, Ethan. There is no tomorrow. There is no measured response. There is only war. Ethan closed his eyes. He thought about Emma sleeping in her bed, surrounded by her drawings and her dreams. He thought about the butterfly stickers on her hearing aids. He thought about the future they were fighting for. Then let's go to war, he said. And in the darkness of the sedan, racing through the city streets toward a showdown that would change everything, Ethan Cole finally understood something. He wasn't just fighting for his daughter anymore. He wasn't just fighting for Victoria. He was fighting for the first time in 3 years, for a life worth living. And he would not lose. Not this time. Not ever again. The war room was Victoria's private conference room on the 47th floor of Lane Technologies, a space that few employees even knew existed, accessible only through a hidden door in her office. It had been designed for crisis management, for the kind of situations where information security meant the difference between survival and destruction. Tonight, it served its purpose. Ethan arrived just after midnight, the laptop and storage drives clutched against his chest like sacred artifacts. Victoria was already there, along with Margaret, 2 lawyers Ethan had never met, and a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a cybersecurity firm logo on her badge. Show me, Victoria said the moment he walked in. Ethan connected the laptop to the room's secure display system. Within seconds, the evidence of Damien Cross's betrayal filled the screen. Thousands of documents, hundreds of emails, recordings that stretched back years. The room fell silent as the scope of it became clear. My God, Margaret whispered. He's been planning this since the beginning. The cybersecurity expert, her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Margaret, leaned forward, her fingers flying across a keyboard as she sorted through the files. This is comprehensive. Financial fraud, insider trading, corporate espionage, and here, she pulled up a specific folder. Evidence of the Meridian deal. He's been negotiating the sale of Project Helios for 18 months. The purchase price is $4.2 billion, of which Damien personally receives $800 million in consulting fees and stock options. $800 million? One of the lawyers repeated. For selling technology he had no right to sell. It gets worse. Sarah opened another file. He's been manipulating Lane Technologies' stock price for years, spreading negative information through shell companies, suppressing positive news, all designed to depress the share price so Meridian can acquire at a discount. She looked at Victoria. He's not just stealing from you. He's stealing from every shareholder in the company. Victoria's face was unreadable. She stood at the head of the table, her hands flat on the surface, staring at the evidence of betrayal by a man she had trusted for nearly a decade. Can we use this? She asked quietly. Legally? The senior lawyer, a silver-haired man named Harrison Wright, rubbed his chin. The acquisition method is problematic. Dr. Cole accessed a private server without authorization. Any criminal prosecution would be complicated by questions of how the evidence was obtained. What about the board? Civil action. Different standard. In a civil case or a board proceeding, the evidence itself matters more than how it was gathered. And this evidence, Harrison gestured at the screen. This is a smoking gun. Multiple smoking guns. If you present this to the board, Damien Cross is finished. When is the next board meeting? Scheduled for 3 weeks from now, but given the circumstances, you could call an emergency session. How quickly? 48 hours minimum. We'd need to follow proper notification procedures, document everything, prepare a presentation that walks through the evidence clearly. Victoria nodded slowly. Do it. I want the board convened in 48 hours. She turned to Sarah. In the meantime, I need you to secure these files. Multiple backups, multiple locations. If Damien tries to destroy the evidence, I want copies he can never reach. Already on it. And Ethan. Victoria's eyes met his, and he saw something in them that made his heart twist. Gratitude. Fear. And something else, something deeper. Thank you. I know what you risked tonight. I'd do it again, he said, without hesitation. Before anyone could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and felt his blood turn to ice. It was a message from Mrs. Patterson. Emma woke up crying. She says she can't hear anything in her left ear. I think you need to come home. The drive to Mrs. Patterson's apartment was a blur. Victoria insisted on coming, canceling everything, refusing to let Ethan face this alone. They left the lawyers and cybersecurity team to continue their work and race through empty streets that seemed to stretch forever. Emma was sitting on Mrs. Patterson's couch when they arrived, her face streaked with tears, her hands pressed against her ears as if she could somehow force them to work through sheer will. "Daddy," she sobbed when she saw him. "I can't hear right. It's all fuzzy and quiet, and I don't like it." Ethan knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. Hey, look at me. It's okay. I'm here." "It's not okay." Emma's voice cracked. "What if it doesn't come back? What if I can't hear you anymore? What if I can't hear Victoria read stories or Mrs. Patterson singing or anything?" Victoria dropped to her knees beside Ethan. "Emma, sweetie, listen to me. We're going to fix this. I promise you." "You can't promise that." Emma's eyes were red, swollen, filled with a fear that no 7-year-old should ever have to carry. "The doctor said it might get worse before the surgery. They said I might lose more hearing. They said—" "I know what the doctor said." Victoria's voice was firm but gentle. "And they're right that there are things we can't control. But here's what I can promise you. Your father and I are going to do everything in our power to make sure you get that surgery as soon as possible. And until then, we're not going to leave your side. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone. Do you understand?" Emma stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Victoria pulled her into a hug, holding her tight while the little girl cried. Over Emma's shoulder, her eyes met Ethan's. He saw it then, the moment when everything changed. The moment when Victoria Lane, CEO and billionaire and master of her universe, became something else entirely. A mother, not biologically, not officially, but in every way that mattered. They took Emma home and put her to bed, staying with her until she finally fell asleep. Then they sat together in Ethan's kitchen, drinking cold coffee and trying to make sense of a world that seemed determined to fall apart. "I'm calling Dr. Morrison first thing in the morning," Ethan said. "We need to move up the surgery timeline." "How much can we accelerate it?" "I don't know. The specialist we've been working with said she needed at least 2 more weeks of preparation. But that was before tonight." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "There might be another option." "What do you mean?" "There's a surgeon in New York, Dr. James Whitfield. He's the best in the country for pediatric cochlear procedures. He has a reputation for taking urgent cases that other doctors won't touch. I've heard of him. His waiting list is 18 months long." "Not for everyone." Victoria pulled out her phone. 3 years ago, I donated $15 million to fund his research program. He owes me a favor." "Victoria, you can't just watch me." She was already dialing. "I told you I would do whatever it takes. I meant it." The call connected. Ethan listened as Victoria explained the situation in clinical, precise terms. Emma's condition, the sudden deterioration, the urgency of the timeline. He couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he could read Victoria's expression as it shifted from determination to relief. "Thank you, James. I won't forget this." She hung up and turned to Ethan. "He can see her tomorrow. If she's a candidate for his procedure, he can operate within the week." Ethan stared at her. "Tomorrow? That's impossible." "Apparently not." Victoria's smile was tired but triumphant. "I told you, whatever it takes." He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to express the gratitude and relief and love that was threatening to overwhelm him. So instead, he crossed the kitchen, took her face in his hands, and kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. It was simply the inevitable result of two people who had been circling each other for weeks, drawn together by circumstance and held together by something much stronger. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was trembling. "Ethan," she whispered, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be this." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." "What if I mess it up? What if I hurt you or Emma or—" "Then we'll deal with it. Together." He rested his forehead against hers. "I spent 3 years being alone because I thought it was safer. I was wrong. The safest I've ever felt is right here, with you." Victoria closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. "I think I love you," she said. "I'm not sure because I've never really loved anyone before, but I think this is what it feels like." "It is," Ethan said, "and I love you too. Both of you, you and Emma, my family." "Family," Victoria repeated, as if tasting the word. "I've never had one of those." "You do now." They held each other in the dim light of the kitchen, two broken people finding wholeness in each other's arms, while somewhere in the city, Damian Cross was preparing his counterattack. But for this moment, just this one precious moment, the war could wait. Morning came too quickly. The trip to New York was a whirlwind of private cars and first-class flights and medical facilities that looked more like luxury hotels than hospitals. Dr. James Whitfield was everything his reputation suggested: brilliant, decisive, and surprisingly warm with children who were clearly terrified. He spent 2 hours examining Emma, running tests, reviewing her medical history. When he finally emerged from the examination room, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "She's a good candidate," he told Ethan and Victoria. "The deterioration is significant, but we're not past the point of no return. If we operate within the next 5 days, I'm confident we can preserve and potentially restore full hearing in both ears." 5 days, Ethan repeated. That's wonderful." "There's a complication." Dr. Whitfield hesitated. "The specific procedure Emma needs requires a specialized surgical suite that's currently booked. I can bump other patients, my discretion, my call, but I need to be honest with you. There are people who won't be happy about this. People with connections." "What kind of people?" "A board member at this hospital has a grandchild scheduled for a similar procedure next week. If I move Emma ahead of that child, there will be political consequences." Victoria's expression hardened. "Who is the board member?" "Victoria, I don't want to drag you into hospital politics." "Who?" Dr. Whitfield sighed. "His name is Marcus Webb. He's also a major investor in Meridian Health." The name hit Victoria like a physical blow. Meridian. Damian's partners in the hostile takeover. The coincidence was too perfect to be coincidence at all. "He knows we're here," she said quietly. "Damian knows." "What?" Dr. Whitfield looked confused. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. It's complicated. Hospital politics are the least of our concerns." Victoria pulled out her phone. "James, I need you to do something for me. Schedule Emma's surgery for as early as possible. Not because of favors owed, but because it's the right thing to do. A child's hearing is at stake. That should matter more than any board member's grandchild." "I agree. But Webb has significant influence. Let me worry about Webb. You focus on saving my daughter's hearing." Oh, she said it without thinking. "My daughter." And then froze, realizing what had slipped out. Ethan was staring at her. Dr. Whitfield was staring at her. Even Emma, who had emerged from the examination room with a nurse, was staring at her. "I mean," Victoria started. "It's okay," Emma said softly. She walked over and took Victoria's hand. "You can call me that, if you want. I don't mind." Victoria's eyes glistened. "You don't?" "No, I like having two parents." Emma squeezed her hand. "Even if one of them is kind of scary sometimes." "I'm not scary." "You made that mean doctor at the front desk cry." "He was being rude about the paperwork." "He definitely cried." Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the shadow of Damian Cross looming over them, Ethan laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full and real, and it broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. "She has you there," he said. Victoria tried to look offended and failed completely. Fine, maybe I'm a little scary, but only to people who deserve it. I'll remember that, Dr. Whitfield said dryly. Emma, I'll see you in 3 days for preoperative testing. In the meantime, rest, stay calm, and try not to let your parents terrify any more hospital staff. I'll try, Emma said, but no promises. They left the hospital with something Ethan hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope that Emma's hearing could be saved, that their nightmare might finally be ending. That hope lasted exactly 4 hours. They were in the car heading back to the airport when Victoria's phone rang. She answered, listened for 30 seconds, and then her face went pale. When? She asked. How long do we have? She hung up and turned to Ethan with an expression he'd never seen before, raw, unfiltered panic. Damien called an emergency board meeting. He's moving to have me removed as CEO. What? He can't do that. We have the evidence. He's not waiting for us to use it. He's accelerating his timeline, trying to force me out before we can present anything. Victoria's hands were shaking. The meeting is in 36 hours. If I'm not there to defend myself, the board will vote in absentia. And according to my source, he has enough votes to win. Then we go back. We present the evidence early. It's not ready. Sarah needs at least another day to compile everything into a coherent presentation. The lawyers need time to review to make sure we don't expose ourselves to countercharges. Victoria's voice was rising, edged with hysteria. He's outmaneuvered us. Again, every time I think we're 1 step ahead, he's already 3 steps beyond. Victoria, listen to me. Ethan took her hands, forcing her to focus. We are not going to let him win, not after everything we've been through. How? How do we stop someone who's always 1 move ahead? By changing the game. He's expecting you to fight on his terms, in his arena, by his rules. So we don't do that. Ethan's mind was racing, falling back on the crisis training he'd received years ago. In emergency medicine, when standard protocols failed, you improvised, you adapted, you found solutions that no one had thought of before. We go to the board meeting, but we don't play defense. We go on offense. With what? Incomplete evidence? With something better. With witnesses. Victoria stared at him. Witnesses? Rachel Mercer. She was willing to talk before. She gave us the passwords, the files, everything we needed. If she's willing to testify directly, to stand in front of the board and tell them what she saw, what Damien made her do, that's more powerful than any document. Damien will destroy her. He'll use every connection he has to ruin her life. Not if we protect her, not if we make it clear that she's under your personal protection, that any retaliation against her is retaliation against Lane Technologies. Ethan leaned forward. Think about it, Victoria. The board doesn't just need to see evidence of Damien's crimes. They need to see what kind of man he really is. Rachel can show them that. Her fear, her courage, her willingness to risk everything to do the right thing, that's the story that will convince them. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, slowly, the panic in her eyes began to fade, replaced by something sharper, something stronger. You're right, she said. Documents can be disputed, manipulated, explained away. But a person standing in front of them, telling them the truth, that's much harder to ignore. So we find Rachel. We convince her to testify, and then we walk into that board meeting and we burn Damien Cross to the ground. Victoria's jaw set with determination. Call her, now! Rachel Mercer answered on the 3rd ring, and her voice was trembling before Ethan even finished explaining why he was calling. I can't, she whispered. I already did more than I should have. If Damien finds out, Rachel, he already knows. He caught me at the server. He knows you helped us. Silence on the other end of the line. When Rachel spoke again, her voice was hollow. Then I'm already dead. Professionally, personally, it's over. It doesn't have to be. Victoria can protect you. We can protect you. But we need your help. The board meeting is in 36 hours. And if we don't stop Damien there, he wins everything. You don't understand. He has people everywhere. In the company, in the government, in places you can't even imagine. I've seen things. Rachel's voice cracked. I've seen what happens to people who cross him. They don't just lose their jobs. They lose everything. Their families, their reputations, their lives. And what happens if he wins? Ethan pressed. He sells Project Helios to Meridian. Technology that could save millions of lives gets buried or monetized beyond reach. Everything Victoria has built gets destroyed. Is that what you want? Of course not. But I have a daughter too, Ethan. She's 12. Her name is Lily. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you, I promise. You can't promise that. No one can. Ethan closed his eyes. He thought about Emma, about the fear in her eyes when she'd woken up unable to hear, about the lengths he would go to protect her. You're right, he said quietly. I can't promise that nothing will happen. What I can promise is that we will fight for you, the same way we're fighting for ourselves. Victoria isn't the kind of person who abandons people who help her. If you do this, you won't be alone. There was a long pause. Ethan could hear Rachel breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel her wrestling with the impossible choice. My daughter, she said finally. If I do this, I need to know she's safe, completely safe. Somewhere Damien can't reach her. Done. Victoria has resources, security, safe houses, whatever you need. And my job. After all this is over, I'll need work. You'll have it. Victoria will make sure of that. Another long pause, then quietly, okay, I'll do it. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Thank you, Rachel. You're saving more than just a company. I hope so, because if this goes wrong, we're all going to burn. The next 36 hours were controlled chaos. Victoria's team worked around the clock, preparing for the board meeting. Sarah Chen compiled the digital evidence into a presentation that walked through Damien's crimes step by step. The lawyers drafted legal filings that would be submitted simultaneously to federal regulators. Security personnel escorted Rachel and her daughter to a safe location where Damien's reach couldn't follow. And through it all, Ethan stayed by Victoria's side. He brought her coffee when she forgot to eat. He reminded her to sleep when her eyes started to blur. He stood beside her during strategy sessions, offering the perspective of an outsider who could see things that people too close to the situation might miss. He also called Dr. Whitfield's office 3 times a day to check on Emma's surgery schedule. Each time, the answer was the same. The procedure was still on track, despite pressure from Marcus Webb and his Meridian connections. Dr. Whitfield, it seemed, was not the kind of man who compromised when a child's health was at stake. The night before the board meeting, Victoria and Ethan sat together in her penthouse, going over the presentation one final time. It was nearly 3 in the morning, and they were both running on fumes. What if it's not enough? Victoria asked quietly. What if they see all this evidence, hear Rachel's testimony, and still vote to remove me? They won't. You don't know that. Half the board has been cultivated by Damien for years. They trust him. They believe his version of reality. Then we show them a different version. Ethan set down the tablet he'd been reviewing. Victoria, you've spent 15 years building this company. You've created something that genuinely helps people, that makes the world better. That's not nothing. That matters. Does it? Sometimes I wonder if any of it matters. If I've just been fooling myself all along. Ethan moved closer, taking her hands in his. Listen to me. 3 months ago, I was a broken man. I'd lost everything. My career, my marriage, my sense of who I was. The only thing keeping me going was Emma, and even that felt like it was slipping away. And now? Now I have hope. Real hope. For Emma, for myself, for whatever this is between us. He squeezed her hands. You gave me that. Not just the job or the money for Emma's surgery. You gave me something to believe in again. That's what you do, Victoria. You give people hope. And tomorrow, you're going to walk into that boardroom and remind everyone why they believed in you in the first place. Victoria's eyes glistened. What if I can't? What if I walk in there and freeze or stumble or you won't, because I'll be there, standing right beside you. They won't let you into the boardroom. You're not a board member. Then I'll wait outside. I'll be the first face you see when you walk out victorious. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You're not alone anymore, Victoria. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, softly, gently, like a promise. Stay with me tonight, she whispered. I don't want to be alone. Always, he said, for as long as you'll have me. They held each other as the city lights glittered outside the window, drawing strength from each other's presence. Tomorrow would bring the fight of their lives. But tonight, they had this. And for now, it was enough. The boardroom of Lane Technologies occupied the entire 50th floor of the building. It was designed to intimidate, floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views, a table that could seat 30, artwork worth more than most people's homes. Everything about it screamed power, influence, consequence. Victoria arrived at precisely 9 a.m., flanked by Margaret and Harrison Wright. She wore her armor, a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression carved from ice. If she felt any of the fear she'd confessed the night before, she gave no sign. Ethan waited in the anteroom, close enough to hear but not permitted to enter. Rachel sat beside him, pale and trembling, clutching a folder of documents to her chest like a shield. "You can do this," Ethan told her quietly. "Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." "The truth?" Rachel laughed bitterly. "Do you know how long it's been since the truth mattered in that room? It matters today. I promise you that." Through the heavy doors, they could hear the meeting being called to order. The chairman's voice, a man named Theodore Banks who had been on the board since the company's founding, cut through the murmurs. "We are convened for an emergency session requested by Chief Financial Officer Damian Cross. Mr. Cross, you have the floor." Damian's voice was smooth, confident, utterly in control. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the board's willingness to convene on short notice. What I have to share today could not wait." There was a pause, presumably as Damian arranged his materials or connected to a presentation system. "For the past several months, I have been quietly documenting a pattern of behavior that I believe constitutes gross mismanagement of this company by our CEO, Victoria Lane. Erratic decision-making, inappropriate personal relationships that compromise corporate security, and most troublingly, evidence that she has been pursuing a secret agenda that puts her personal interests above those of our shareholders." "This is absurd," Victoria's voice, cold and sharp. "Damian, what exactly are you accusing me of?" "I'm accusing you of nothing, Victoria. I'm simply presenting facts and allowing the board to draw their own conclusions." Another pause. "For example, the board may not be aware that you have recently hired a personal driver with a highly questionable background, a disgraced doctor who lost his license after a patient death, a man who has been seen leaving your apartment at all hours of the night." Murmurs from the board. Ethan felt his jaw clench. "Furthermore," Damian continued, "this same individual was caught just 3 nights ago breaking into a secure data facility. A facility that, I should add, has no connection to Lane Technologies' operations. One wonders what he was looking for, and what he was looking for on your behalf." "The board has no interest in my personal life," Victoria said, "and Dr. Cole's background has been thoroughly vetted." "Has it? By whom? Your personal lawyers? Your pet security team?" Damian's voice dripped with false concern. "Victoria, I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to protect this company, a company that you have increasingly treated as your personal fiefdom rather than a publicly traded corporation with obligations to its shareholders. This is ridiculous. Is it? Then perhaps you can explain why Project Helios, our most valuable intellectual property, remains years behind schedule and massively over budget. Why key employees have left in droves over the past 18 months. Why our stock price has declined 23% since you rejected the very partnerships I've been cultivating." "Partnerships?" Victoria's laugh was harsh. "You mean the secret negotiations with Meridian Health? The ones where you personally stand to receive $800 million if this company is sold?" Silence. Complete, ringing silence. "I don't know what you're talking about," Damian said, but there was a slight crack in his composure. "Don't you? Then perhaps you can explain this." Ethan heard the sound of a tablet being passed around the table. He could imagine the board members' faces as they saw the evidence, the emails, the financial records, the proof of Damian's betrayal. "This is fabricated," Damian said quickly. "These documents are forgeries planted by Victoria to discredit me. These documents were extracted from your private server 3 nights ago. The same server you just mentioned, the one with no connection to Lane Technologies. Funny how you knew about that break-in, considering the facility isn't supposed to exist." More murmurs, louder now. The tide was beginning to turn. "I'd like to call a witness," Victoria continued. "Someone who can speak to the authenticity of these documents. Someone who has worked closely with Mr. Cross for 3 years and can testify to his activities." The door to the anteroom opened. Margaret appeared, gesturing to Rachel. "That's your cue," Ethan said quietly. Rachel took a deep breath. Her hands were still shaking, but there was steel in her eyes. "Tell them the truth," Ethan said. "That's all you have to do." Rachel nodded once, then walked through the door into the boardroom. The next 20 minutes were some of the longest of Ethan's life. He could hear Rachel's voice, quiet at first, but growing stronger as she described what she had witnessed. The documents she had been forced to sign, the emails she had been ordered to delete, the meetings that were never recorded, the conversations that happened in shadows. He could hear Damien trying to interrupt, trying to discredit her, trying to paint her as a disgruntled employee with a grudge. But the board wasn't listening to him anymore. They were listening to Rachel, a woman who had nothing to gain and everything to lose by telling the truth. When she described the pressure tactics Damien had used against employees who questioned him, an older female board member audibly gasped. When she produced a recording of Damien explicitly discussing the Meridian deal and his personal payout, the chairman called for order as the room erupted. And when she looked directly at the board and said, "I'm here because someone has to stop this. Because a little girl almost lost her hearing because this man wanted to blackmail her father. Because I can't stay silent anymore." There was nothing Damien could say that would undo the damage. The boardroom doors finally opened and Victoria emerged. She was pale, exhausted, but there was something in her eyes that Ethan had never seen before. Victory. "It's over," she said. The board voted unanimously to terminate Damien's employment and refer the matter to federal authorities. They're also opening an investigation into everyone he corrupted. She took a shaky breath. "We won." Ethan pulled her into his arms, not caring who was watching. I told you we'd win." "I couldn't have done it without you, without Rachel, without any of it." "You could have. You would have found a way. That's who you are." Behind them, Rachel emerged from the boardroom, looking shell-shocked but relieved. Victoria broke away from Ethan and crossed to her. "Thank you," Victoria said. "What you did in there, I can never repay you. Just keep your promise. Protect my daughter. Give me a chance to rebuild. You have my word. Whatever you need for as long as you need it." Rachel nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Then she walked to Ethan and hugged him, fiercely, desperately. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing I could do it. I knew you could. I never doubted." The moment was interrupted by the sound of raised voices from inside the boardroom. Security personnel were escorting Damien Cross toward a side exit, away from the main elevators. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The mask of charm and confidence had crumbled, revealing something ugly underneath, a man who had gambled everything and lost. But as he passed the doorway, he caught Ethan's eye. And in that moment, Ethan saw something that made his blood run cold. Damien wasn't broken. He was furious. "This isn't over," Damien called out as security pulled him forward. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that go deeper than any boardroom. You'll regret this, all of you." His eyes locked on Ethan's. "Especially you, Dr. Cole. You and your precious daughter. Enjoy your victory while it lasts." Then he was gone, disappeared into an elevator with security guards flanking him like prison escorts. The threat hung in the air like poison. Victoria turned to Ethan, her face pale. "He's not going to stop. Even without the company, he'll try to hurt us." "I know. What do we do?" Ethan looked at the closed elevator doors at the space where Damien had stood. He thought about Emma, about the surgery scheduled for tomorrow, about the life they were trying to build. "We don't let fear win," he said. "We protect our family. We stay vigilant. And we remember that he's the one who lost today, not us." "And if he comes after us?" Ethan met her eyes. "Then we face it together. Whatever comes. That's what family does." Victoria took his hand, squeezing tight. "Together," she repeated. Behind them, the sun was streaming through the boardroom windows, casting long shadows across the floor. It should have felt like a new beginning, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the darkest hours were still ahead. The phone call came 6 hours later. They were at Victoria's penthouse, finally allowing themselves to rest after the battle of the boardroom. Emma was there too, brought over by Mrs. Patterson so they could be together as a family. She was curled up on the couch, drawing pictures while Victoria and Ethan sat nearby, too exhausted to do anything but exist. When Ethan's phone rang, he almost didn't answer. But something, instinct perhaps, or the paranoia that came from weeks of living under threat, made him pick it up. The voice on the other end was one he didn't recognize. "Dr. Cole? This is Boston General Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter's surgical procedure scheduled for tomorrow." Ethan's heart stopped. "Yes? I'm sorry to inform you that the procedure has been canceled." "What?" "No, that's impossible. We confirmed everything with Dr. Whitfield's office just yesterday." "I understand, sir. However, Dr. Whitfield has been temporarily suspended pending an investigation into his hospital privileges. All of his scheduled procedures have been canceled indefinitely." The room started to spin. Ethan gripped the arm of the couch, trying to stay upright. "An investigation? What kind of investigation?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, sir. I can only tell you that the suspension came at the request of a major hospital donor. I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do." The call ended. Ethan sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear as the full weight of what had happened crashed down on him. Damien. Even in defeat, Damien had found a way to strike back. Marcus Webb, the board member with Meridian connections, he had pulled strings, fabricated accusations, gotten Dr. Whitfield suspended, all to hurt Emma, all to punish Ethan and Victoria for daring to fight back. "Ethan?" Victoria was at his side, her face pale with concern. "What is it? What happened?" He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Emma looked up from her drawing, sensing that something was wrong. "Daddy? Are you okay?" The sound of her voice, so innocent, so trusting, broke something inside him. "The surgery," he managed. "It's been canceled. Dr. Whitfield has been suspended." Suspended? Why? Damien. It has to be Damien. He's using his connections to destroy anyone who helps us. Victoria's expression shifted from concern to fury. "That bastard! Even after everything—" "Victoria," Ethan's voice cracked. "Emma's hearing. Without the surgery." He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't bring himself to say the words that would make it real, permanent, irreversible, gone. Emma set down her crayons and walked over to them. She was only 7, but she understood more than any child should have to. "I'm going to be okay," she said quietly. "Even if I can't hear anymore, I'm going to be okay. I'll learn sign language. I'll read lips. It won't be the end of the world." "Emma? Daddy, look at me." She took his hands in her small ones. "You always tell me that brave people aren't people who aren't scared. They're people who are scared but do things anyway, right?" "Right," he whispered. "So we'll be brave. Together. All 3 of us." She looked at Victoria, then back at Ethan. "Whatever happens, we'll be brave." Ethan pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, fighting against the tears that threatened to overwhelm him. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. They had won. They had defeated Damien, exposed his crimes, saved Victoria's company. They were supposed to be celebrating, not facing a new crisis. But life, he had learned long ago, didn't follow scripts. Victoria knelt down beside them, wrapping her arms around both of them. "We're not giving up," she said fiercely. "There are other surgeons, other hospitals, other ways to fight. Damien may have won this battle, but he hasn't won the war." "How?" Ethan asked. "He's shown that he can reach anyone, that there's nowhere we can go that he can't follow." "Then we stop running." Victoria's eyes were blazing. "We stop playing defense. We take the fight to him." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Damien Cross just made the biggest mistake of his life. He came after my daughter." The word hung in the air, my daughter, and this time Victoria didn't correct herself. "And I am going to destroy him for it, completely, permanently, in a way that he will never recover from." "Victoria, I have resources he doesn't know about, connections in places he's never thought to look. And I have something else, something more powerful than any amount of money or influence." "What?" Victoria looked at Emma, at the brave little girl who was facing the possibility of losing her hearing with more courage than most adults could muster. "Motivation," she said. I have something worth fighting for. She stood up, pulling out her phone, her mind already racing through possibilities. Margaret, I need you to call in every favor we've ever been owed, every connection, every ally, every person who has ever benefited from Lane Technologies. I want a meeting, tonight, with everyone who has reason to want Damien Cross brought down. She listened for a moment, then nodded. And Margaret? Tell them this is personal. Tell them he came after a child. Tell them that anyone who helps us will have my gratitude, and anyone who doesn't will have my attention. She hung up and turned back to Ethan and Emma. We're going to fix this, she said. I don't know how yet, but I promise you, we are going to fix this. Ethan looked at her, this woman who had gone from distant CEO to partner to family in the space of a few short months. This woman who had started out so alone and was now willing to burn down the world to protect a little girl who wasn't even her own blood. I believe you, he said. And he did. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As a family. The meeting happened at midnight. Victoria had commandeered a private dining room at the Ritz-Carlton, a space usually reserved for heads of state and business titans negotiating billion-dollar mergers. Tonight, it held something far more valuable, a coalition of people who had their own reasons to want Damien Cross destroyed. There was Senator Patricia Hawkins, whose healthcare reform bill had been systematically undermined by Meridian Health's lobbying efforts. There was Dr. Marcus Chen, a former colleague of Damien's who had been pushed out of the industry after refusing to participate in fraudulent research. There was Isabella Reyes, a journalist who had been investigating Meridian's practices for 3 years and had the sources to prove widespread corruption. And there was someone Ethan hadn't expected, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that could cut glass. This is Helen Whitfield, Victoria said, introducing her. Dr. James Whitfield's mother. She also happens to be a former federal prosecutor. Helen extended her hand to Ethan with a grip that suggested she had spent her career intimidating criminals and corrupt officials. My son called me this afternoon, she said. Told me about the suspension, about the little girl who needs surgery. He also told me who was behind it. Her eyes hardened. Damien Cross made a serious mistake when he went after my family. That seems to be his specialty, Ethan said quietly. Going after families. Then let's make sure it's the last mistake he ever makes. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, they had assembled a strategy that attacked Damien from every possible angle. Senator Hawkins would call for a congressional inquiry into Meridian Health's practices. Dr. Chen would provide testimony about the fraudulent research that Damien had overseen years ago. Isabella Reyes would publish an expose that connected Damien to a web of corruption spanning multiple industries. And Helen Whitfield would file criminal charges. I still have friends at the Justice Department, she said. Friends who have been looking for an excuse to go after Meridian for years. The evidence you've gathered, the financial fraud, the stock manipulation, the interference with a child's medical care, that's enough for a federal case. Not just against Damien, but against everyone who helped him. How long will it take? Victoria asked. The investigation will move quickly once it starts, but we're talking weeks, possibly months, before any arrests are made. We don't have months. Emma's hearing is deteriorating every day. Helen leaned forward. That's the other thing I wanted to discuss. My son's suspension was based on a complaint filed by Marcus Webb. I've already spoken to the hospital board. The complaint has no merit. It's pure retaliation. By tomorrow morning, James will have his privileges restored. Ethan felt his heart stop. Tomorrow morning? He's already preparing. The surgery will proceed as scheduled, just 12 hours later than originally planned. Helen's stern expression softened slightly. Your daughter is going to be fine, Dr. Cole. I promise you that. Ethan couldn't speak. The relief was so overwhelming that he felt his knees buckle. Victoria was at his side instantly, her hand on his arm, steadying him. Thank you, he managed. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by making sure Damien Cross pays for what he's done. To your daughter, to my son, to everyone he's hurt over the years. Victoria nodded grimly. Count on it. The next morning dawned cold and gray. Ethan and Victoria brought Emma to the hospital at 6 a.m., 3 hours before the rescheduled surgery. She was quiet in the car, her small hand clutched tightly in Ethan's, her butterfly-stickered hearing aids glinting in the pale light. "Are you scared?" he asked her gently. "A little." Emma looked up at him with those two wise eyes, but the good kind of scared, like before a roller coaster. "A roller coaster? You know you're going to be okay, but your stomach still feels all twisty." She managed a small smile. "That's how I feel." Victoria reached over from the front seat and took Emma's other hand. "We'll be right there when you wake up. Both of us. The very first thing you see. Promise?" "I promise." Dr. Whitfield met them at the surgical suite, looking tired but determined. The past 24 hours had taken their toll on him. The suspension, the accusations, the frantic efforts to restore his privileges. But his hands were steady and his voice was calm. "Emma, do you remember what we talked about yesterday?" he asked, kneeling down to her level. "You're going to fix my ears so I can hear better." "That's right, and when you wake up, everything is going to sound different for a while. Maybe louder, maybe quieter. It might take some time for your brain to adjust, but I want you to know that no matter what, you did an amazing job being brave." Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm good at being brave." "I can tell." Dr. Whitfield straightened and looked at Ethan and Victoria. "The procedure will take approximately 4 hours. I'll have someone update you every hour. Try to rest if you can. There's a family waiting area just down the hall." Ethan knelt down and hugged Emma tightly. "I love you, sweetheart. More than anything in the world." "I love you too, Daddy." She hugged him back, then pulled away and looked at Victoria. "Victoria? Will you be my mom now? For real?" The question hung in the air. Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I would be honored," she whispered. "For real." Emma smiled. That bright, brilliant smile that had carried Ethan through the darkest days of his life. And then she was being wheeled away, disappearing through the surgical suite doors while the two people who loved her most stood helplessly behind. The waiting room became their universe. 4 hours stretched into eternity. Ethan paced. Victoria made calls, coordinating the various attacks on Damien, ensuring that the coalition they had assembled was moving forward. Margaret brought coffee that neither of them touched. The hourly updates from the surgical team were encouraging but vague. Procedure progressing normally. No complications so far. Dr. Whitfield is pleased with the progress. By the 3rd hour, Ethan couldn't pace anymore. He sat down next to Victoria, took her hand, and simply held on. "I've been thinking," Victoria said quietly, "about what happens after this, after Emma's surgery, after Damien is dealt with. And I want to change things, not just at the company, in my life. I've spent so long building walls, keeping people out, convincing myself that I was better off alone." She looked at him. "I don't want to be alone anymore." "You're not alone." "I know, that's what I'm trying to say." She took a deep breath. "After everything settles down, I want us to be a real family. Not just in practice, officially. I want to adopt Emma. If you'll let me." Ethan stared at her. "Victoria, I know it's sudden. I know we've only been together for a few months, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Emma is my daughter. You're the man I love. And I want the world to know it." Before Ethan could respond, the surgical suite doors opened. Dr. Whitfield emerged, still in his scrubs, pulling off his surgical cap. His face was unreadable. Ethan's heart stopped. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world narrowed to a single point. The expression on Dr. Whitfield's face, the words that would determine everything. And then Dr. Whitfield smiled. "The surgery was a complete success. Emma's hearing has been fully restored in both ears. She's going to be fine." The words hit Ethan like a wave, washing away weeks of fear and tension and desperate hope. His knees gave out, and he would have fallen if Victoria hadn't caught him. "She's okay?" he managed. "She can hear?" Better than before, actually. The procedure corrected not just the current damage, but some underlying issues we discovered during the operation. With proper follow-up care, she should have normal hearing for the rest of her life. Victoria was crying. Ethan had never seen her cry before. Not really cry, with tears streaming down her face and her shoulders shaking, but she was crying now, and somehow it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Can we see her?" she asked. "She's in recovery. It'll be about an hour before she's fully awake." "But yes, you can see her." They followed Dr. Whitfield down the hallway to the recovery room. Emma was lying in a hospital bed, looking impossibly small, with bandages around her ears and monitors beeping softly beside her. But her color was good, and her breathing was steady, and when Ethan took her hand, he felt her fingers curl around his. "She's dreaming," Dr. Whitfield said quietly. "Let her rest. When she wakes up, she's going to want to see you." He left them alone with their daughter. Ethan and Victoria sat on either side of the bed, holding Emma's hands, watching her chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. The sunlight had shifted while they waited, and now golden afternoon light streamed through the window, casting warm shadows across the room. "We did it," Victoria whispered. "We actually did it." "We did." Ethan looked at her across the bed, this woman who had transformed from a distant CEO to the love of his life in the space of a few short months. "And yes." "Yes?" "To your question about adopting Emma, about being a real family." He smiled through his tears. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." Victoria's answering smile was like the sun coming out after a storm. They sat there together, watching over their daughter as the afternoon light faded into evening. Somewhere in the city, Damian Cross was facing the consequences of his actions. Federal investigators were already moving, journalists were preparing their stories, and a coalition of his victims was closing in from every direction. But in this room, none of that mattered. In this room, there was only a little girl with butterfly stickers on her hearing aids, sleeping peacefully while the two people who loved her most held her hands and waited for her to wake up. The moment came just after 7 p.m. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked around the room, confused at first, then focused on Ethan's face. "Daddy?" Her voice was hoarse from the anesthesia, but it was the most beautiful sound Ethan had ever heard. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. My ears feel weird." "That's normal. The doctor said it would take a little while to adjust." Emma blinked, processing this information. Then her eyes widened. "Daddy, I can hear you, really hear you." Tears started sliding down her cheeks. "You're not fuzzy anymore." Ethan couldn't help it. He started crying too, big, ugly sobs that he couldn't control. Victoria reached across the bed and took his hand, her own tears flowing freely. "I can hear everything," Emma whispered, wonder in her voice. "The beeping machines, the people in the hallway, you're crying." She giggled weakly. "You cry really loud, Daddy." "I know," he managed. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. They're happy tears." Emma looked at Victoria. "You're crying too. Does this mean we're a family now?" Victoria laughed through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart. We're a family now." "Forever?" "Forever." Emma smiled, that brilliant, world-changing smile, and closed her eyes. "Good," she murmured. "I'm going to sleep now. Wake me up when it's time to go home." Within seconds, she was asleep again, but this time it was the peaceful sleep of a child who knew she was loved, a child who knew she was safe, a child who had a family. Ethan looked at Victoria across the bed, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. They had been through fire together. They had faced down a monster, protected the people they loved, and come out the other side stronger than before. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family, forever. The days following Emma's surgery passed in a blur of recovery and renewal. She spent a week in the hospital, adjusting to her restored hearing with the wonder of a child experiencing the world for the first time. Every sound was a miracle: the rustle of sheets, the footsteps of nurses in the hallway, the soft beeping of monitors that had once been nothing but fuzzy static. She would close her eyes and ask Ethan or Victoria to whisper from across the room, then break into delighted laughter when she could understand every word. "I can hear the birds," she announced one morning, sitting up in her hospital bed with her face turned toward the window. "Real birds, singing. I forgot what that sounded like." Ethan sat beside her, holding her hand, watching her rediscover the world. Victoria was on the other side, having barely left the hospital room in days. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates about the unfolding situation with Damian Cross, but she barely glanced at it. Nothing mattered more than being here, in this room, with her family. "What else can you hear?" Victoria asked. Emma tilted her head, concentrating. The lady down the hall is watching a cooking show. Someone's eating chips really loudly, and she paused, a mischievous smile spreading across her face. I can hear Daddy's stomach growling. I had breakfast, Ethan protested. 3 hours ago. You need to eat more, Daddy. Victoria, tell him he needs to eat more. Victoria laughed, a warm, genuine sound that Ethan had come to treasure. She's right, you know. I'll have Margaret bring something. I'm fine. Daddy. Emma fixed him with a stern look that was so reminiscent of Victoria that it startled him. You always tell me I need to take care of myself. That means you too. She has you there, Victoria said. Ethan raised his hands in surrender. All right, I'll eat, but only because you two are ganging up on me. That's what families do, Emma said matter-of-factly. Gang up on each other. With love. The words hung in the air, simple and profound. Families. That's what they were now. Not just in feeling, but in truth. Victoria reached across the bed and took Ethan's hand. Their eyes met over their daughter's head, and in that moment, no words were necessary. They were home. 2 weeks after Emma's discharge, the news broke. Ethan was making breakfast, pancakes, Emma's favorite, when Victoria's phone erupted with notifications. She had been sitting at the kitchen table reviewing documents for the company's restructuring, but now she stared at her screen with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. What is it? He asked. Victoria didn't answer immediately. She set down the phone, stood up, and walked to the window. The morning light caught her face, and Ethan saw something there he had never seen before. Peace. They arrested him, she said quietly. Damien. Federal agents took him into custody an hour ago. 14 counts of securities fraud, conspiracy, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. She turned to face Ethan. It's over. It's really over. Ethan turned off the stove and crossed the room to stand beside her. How do you feel? I don't know. I thought I would feel triumphant, vindicated, but mostly I just feel, she searched for the word, tired, like I've been running for years and I can finally stop. Then stop, rest, you've earned it. There's still so much to do. The company needs restructuring, the board needs new members, Project Helios needs to get back on track. Victoria. Ethan took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. The company can wait. The board can wait. Everything can wait. Right now, in this moment, you are allowed to simply be, to breathe, to exist without fighting. Her eyes glistened. I don't know how to do that. I've been fighting for so long. Then learn. We'll learn together. From the doorway, Emma's voice rang out. Are the pancakes ready? I'm starving. They both laughed, the tension breaking like a wave against rocks. Almost ready, Ethan called back. Give me 5 minutes. Hurry up, my stomach is making whale noises. Ethan kissed Victoria softly, then returned to the stove. As he flipped pancakes and listened to Emma chattering about a dream she'd had, he realized something. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of problems or the perfection of circumstances, but this simple, ordinary morning with the people he loved. Pancakes and sunshine, and a little girl who made whale noises when she was hungry. This was everything. The trial of Damien Cross became a national sensation. Isabella Reyes's expose had been published the day of his arrest, laying bare the full scope of his crimes. The story dominated news cycles for weeks, a tale of corporate greed, betrayal, and the systematic corruption of institutions that were supposed to protect people. But for Ethan and Victoria, the trial was something else entirely. It was closure. Victoria testified on the second day, walking the jury through years of manipulation and deception. She spoke clearly, calmly, without anger or bitterness. She had spent too long carrying the weight of what Damien had done. Now, she was setting it down. He didn't just steal from the company, she said, her voice steady. He stole from every patient who might have benefited from our technology. He stole from every family who lost someone to a disease that early detection could have caught. He stole years of work, of hope, of possibility. And he did it for money, for power, for nothing that matters. Ethan watched from the gallery, Emma's hand in his. The little girl had insisted on coming, on seeing the man who had tried to hurt them face justice. She sat quietly through the testimony, her expression serious beyond her years. "Is he going to go to jail?" she whispered. "Yes," Ethan whispered back, "for a very long time." "Good." Emma squeezed his hand. "He was mean. Mean people should have consequences." "They should." Rachel Mercer testified on the third day. She was nervous at first, her voice shaking as she described the years she had spent under Damien's control. But as she spoke, something changed. Her voice grew stronger, her shoulders straightened. By the time she finished, she was looking directly at Damien, and there was no fear in her eyes. Only defiance. The verdict came after 2 weeks of testimony, guilty on all counts. The sentence, 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Damien Cross was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, his once polished appearance now haggard and diminished. As he passed the gallery, his eyes found Ethan's. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the man who had tried to destroy everything and the man who had stopped him. Then Damien looked away, and he was gone. Outside the courthouse, Victoria stood on the steps, surrounded by reporters and cameras. But she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Ethan and Emma, waiting for her at the bottom of the steps. She walked down to join them, ignoring the shouted questions, the flash of cameras, the chaos that followed her everywhere. "Let's go home," she said. And they did. Spring came to Boston like a promise kept. The trees along Commonwealth Avenue burst into bloom, covering the sidewalks in pink and white petals. The air grew warm and soft, carrying the scent of new beginnings. And in a courtroom very different from the one where Damien Cross had been sentenced, a judge smiled down at a family of 3. "Victoria Lane, do you understand the responsibilities you are undertaking in becoming the legal parent of Emma Cole?" Victoria's voice was steady, but Ethan could see her hands trembling. "I do, Your Honor." "And do you, Ethan Cole, consent to this adoption, agreeing that Victoria Lane will share fully in the rights and responsibilities of parenthood?" "I do." The judge turned to Emma, who was sitting between them in her best dress, her butterfly-stickered hearing aids gleaming in the courtroom light. "And Emma, do you understand what's happening today? That Victoria is becoming your mother, legally and permanently?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor. She's been my mom for a while now. We're just making it official." The judge's smile widened. "Well, I think that's just about the best summary I've ever heard." She picked up her gavel. "By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Victoria Lane is now the legal mother of Emma Cole. Congratulations to your family." The gavel came down. Emma launched herself at Victoria, throwing her arms around her neck. "Mom, I can call you Mom now, for real." Victoria held her tight, tears streaming down her face. "For real, sweetheart. Forever." Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them close. Margaret was in the gallery, crying openly. Dr. Whitfield had come, along with his mother Helen. Even Mickey Sullivan from the bar had shown up, looking uncomfortable in a suit but beaming with pride. They were surrounded by people who loved them, people who had become family in their own right. "I love you," Ethan whispered. "Both of you. More than words can say." "I love you too, Daddy," Emma said. "And Mom. And this family. And pancakes." Victoria laughed through her tears. "Did you just put pancakes in the same category as us? They're really good pancakes." Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine washed over them. Ethan paused on the steps, looking out at the city that had been the backdrop for so much pain and so much healing. "What are you thinking?" Victoria asked. "I'm thinking about how much has changed. A year ago, I was working 3 jobs, barely surviving, watching my daughter's hearing fade away, and now—" He shook his head in wonder. "Now I have everything." "Not everything," Victoria's voice was gentle. "There's something we haven't talked about. Your career. Your real career." Ethan tensed. They had discussed this before, briefly, but he had always deflected. The wounds from losing his medical license were still raw, even after all this time. "That's in the past," he said. "It doesn't have to be." Victoria took his hand. "The malpractice case was dismissed. Your license was suspended pending review, but the review never happened because you didn't fight for it. What if you did? What if you went back?" "Victoria, I'm not sure I can—" I spoke to Helen Whitfield. She knows people on the medical board. With her help, with the right lawyers, there's a chance. A real chance. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the emergency room, about the lives he had saved, about the calling he had abandoned because he was too broken to fight. I don't know if I'm ready, he admitted. You don't have to be ready today, but I want you to know that when you are, if you are, I'll be there. Every step of the way. Emma tugged on his hand. Daddy, are you going to be a doctor again? He looked down at his daughter, this brave, brilliant little girl who had faced her own battles with more courage than he had ever possessed. Maybe, he said. Would you like that? I would like whatever makes you happy. Emma's smile was sunshine. That's what families do. They make each other happy. 6 months later, Dr. Ethan Cole walked through the doors of Massachusetts General Hospital. Not as a janitor, not as a driver, not as a broken man searching for scraps of his former life. As a physician. The path back had been difficult. Hearings, evaluations, skeptical board members, moments when he had wanted to give up. But Victoria had been there through all of it, just as she had promised. And now, finally, he was home. The emergency room was exactly as he remembered. The controlled chaos, the urgency, the constant dance between life and death. But something was different now. He was different. He was no longer the man who had everything to prove. He was a man who had already lost everything, rebuilt from the ashes, and emerged stronger than before. His first patient was a young mother with a sick child. As Ethan examined the little boy, noting symptoms, making assessments, he felt the old instincts returning. The steady hands, the clear thinking, the ability to see what others missed. Is he going to be okay? The mother asked, fear in her voice. He has a severe ear infection, Ethan said gently. We'll get him on antibiotics and keep him for observation, but yes, he's going to be okay. The relief on her face was everything. This was why he had become a doctor in the first place. Not for the prestige or the money, but for this, the ability to take someone's fear and transform it into hope. When his shift ended, Victoria was waiting in the lobby. She had Emma with her, holding a handmade card that read, "Congratulations, Dr. Daddy Sa," in colorful letters. How was it? Victoria asked. Perfect, Ethan said, and he meant it. Absolutely perfect. They walked out into the evening together, a family of 3. The city stretched around them, full of lights and sounds and possibilities. The same city where they had met, where they had fought, where they had nearly lost everything and found each other instead. Mom, can we get ice cream? Emma asked. It's almost dinner time. So? Ice cream can be dinner, right, Daddy? Ethan looked at Victoria with exaggerated helplessness. I don't know. She makes a compelling argument. Victoria sighed, but she was smiling. Fine. Ice cream for dinner, but just this once. That's what you said last time, Emma pointed out. And the time before that, Ethan added. You two are impossible. But Victoria was laughing as she said it, that warm, genuine laugh that Ethan loved more than almost anything in the world. They found an ice cream shop on a corner and sat at a table by the window, watching the city go by. Emma got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Victoria got vanilla bean because of course she did. Ethan got mint chocolate chip, which Emma declared weird but acceptable. I've been thinking, Victoria said, stirring her ice cream thoughtfully. About what? About Project Helios. Now that the company is stable and Damien is dealt with, we're ready to move forward with full implementation. Hospitals across the country are interested. We could potentially help millions of people. That's incredible. It is. But I want to do something more. She looked at him. I want the first hospital to receive the full system to be pediatric focused. I want it to specialize in early detection for children, and I want it to be named after Emma. Ethan stared at her. Victoria. She's the reason I understood what this technology really means. Not as a business or a profit center, but as something that saves families, that keeps parents from having to watch their children suffer. Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. She taught me that. She deserves to have her name on it. Emma, who had been pretending not to listen while focusing intently on her ice cream, looked up with wide eyes. You want to name a hospital after me? Not a hospital exactly. A wing, a program. Something that will help other kids the way you were helped. Will there be butterflies? I want butterflies. Victoria laughed. There can be butterflies. Then, okay. Emma returned to her ice cream as if the matter were settled. But I want to help design it. I have ideas. I'm sure you do. Ethan reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not in the last hour. Then I'm overdue. I love you, Victoria Lane. I love our daughter. I love this strange, beautiful, impossible life we've built. I love you too. Victoria squeezed his hand. Both of you, more than I ever thought I could love anything. Emma made a gagging noise. You guys are being mushy again. Get used to it, Ethan said. We're going to be mushy forever. Forever, forever? Forever, forever. Emma considered this. Okay, but only if we get ice cream every time you get mushy. Deal? Deal? They finished their ice cream and walked home through the warm evening, Emma skipping ahead while Ethan and Victoria followed hand in hand. The apartment they shared now was bigger than Ethan's old place, a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard where Emma could play, and a kitchen big enough for pancake making, and a room that Victoria had converted into an art studio because Emma had once mentioned she liked to draw. It was perfect. Imperfect in all the ways that real homes were imperfect, but perfect nonetheless. That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Ethan and Victoria stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the same city lights that had witnessed their meeting, their battles, their triumphs. Do you ever think about that night? Victoria asked. The night we met? All the time. I was so broken then, so convinced that my life was over. If you hadn't been there, but I was. Ethan pulled her close. And you weren't the only one who was broken. I was falling apart too, just more quietly. We saved each other, Victoria. That's what happened. We saved each other, she repeated softly. I like that. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, watching the lights of the city that had shaped them. Somewhere out there, people were struggling, fighting, hoping. Somewhere, there was a single father working 3 jobs to save his daughter. Somewhere, there was a CEO sitting alone in a penthouse, wondering if anyone would ever see her as human. And maybe, somewhere, 2 of those people would find each other. Maybe they already had. I used to think strength meant doing everything alone, Victoria said, that needing someone made you weak, that love was a vulnerability I couldn't afford. And now? Now I know that love is the only thing that makes strength worth having. What's the point of fighting if you don't have something to fight for? Ethan kissed her forehead. We have everything to fight for now. We do. Victoria smiled against his chest. A daughter who thinks ice cream is a dinner food. A company that might actually change the world. A future that looks nothing like what I expected and everything like what I needed. And each other. And each other. Always. The city glittered below them, full of stories waiting to be told. But theirs was the only one that mattered tonight. A struggling single father who noticed what everyone else missed. A brilliant CEO who had forgotten how to be human. And a brave little girl with butterfly stickers on her hearing aids who had taught them both what it meant to be a family. They had found each other in the darkness, and they would spend the rest of their lives walking together in the light.